Warning. Nerd mode. Live from the basements of losers, this is the Cantina Cuisine. Welcome back to Cantina Cuisine. It's a bit of a scattered schedule, but we are ready to almost end off our Superman month.
Superman week, almost.
Superman week, literally. You just listened to our Superman Returns this past Sunday night, which was a great episode, and now it's my turn with my childhood Superman movie. Is it perfect? No. Does it have probably one of the most weakest Lois Lanes to ever come out? Absolutely. You shush. This is my movie. I will shush you on this one. But we are here to talk about Man of Steel, probably one of the most clever titles for a superhero. It sounds a little weird, but I actually dig it. Starring Richard Schaff, Henry Lennox, Kevin Costner, Lawrence Fishburne, and obviously the great and not so great Amy Adams, Michael Shannon, and the notorious person who keeps getting fired and rehired and fired and rehired, Henry Cavil.
Russell Crowe?
No!
Well,
Henry
when you're looking
Cavil.
at superhero franchises,
Henry
I think
Cavill.
Russell Crowe has had more misses in superhero franchises than anybody else.
I was trying to make a dig at DC because they kept firing and hiring Henry Cavill, but. And I also forgot, Russell Crowe's in this movie. Great artist, except for just a couple of songs. But we are here to get through this. We'll see how long this takes. And then, but this is a lot to talk about today. My name is Patrick.
And my name is Colin, and this is the Cantina Cuisine, a creeping cancer of falsehoods.
Wow. What kind of falsehoods are you
if you've listened to this show... If you listen to the show where every week we're like, hey, we'll be back next week, we're clearly a creeping cancer of falsehood. You're clearly a creeping cancer. I'm just along for the ride.
Well, because of the summer, we'll actually be a little bit more consistent because we got Superman on Friday, we got Fantastic Four at the end of the month. We even have an episode with Jurassic World Rebirth that Colin and Seth have actually recorded together.
People probably heard it already, yeah.
You probably did. Well, I mean, I'm releasing this Sunday night, so you said we're going to release it Monday, so... Oh, actually, no,
you're releasing Superman Returns.
You're
creeping cancer of falsehoods.
Let's just get this started. I am going to say this is my childhood Superman movie, and I never got to go see it in theaters, which I'm actually really sad about, because I feel like that this would be a great time. Great time, because some people didn't like this at the time, but we'll talk about that later. But, again, like I said, is it perfect? No, it is not. I do think that Amy Adams is probably one of the worst characters in this movie, and definitely is. But there is a lot to like here. Zach Snyder was the perfect person to try and capture a superhero movie like this. And if we even want to talk about like why this thing is so dark, because this thing is a new take on Superman, which we actually talked about before. Like I think it was Superman 1 where we were talking about how there was edgier comics of Superman and how this one was adapting a little bit to that. But when we compare this to Marvel at the time, we had Iron Man, we had Captain America, the Winter Soldier, and I think Sword of Dark World was releasing back then, or maybe something like that. And they are
the first Avengers.
And the first Avengers, of course. And now, how do you combat that? Which that is like almost comic accuracy, like blockbuster superhero films. The bright idea of this is being dark, edgy, realistic. Someone with these powers is going to destroy a lot of things. You're being realistic about that. And that is the best formula I think you were able to combat Marvel with. And I will say, at the time, I believe that this is actually better than Marvel's first couple movies. Because of the cinematography, because of the dialogue, because of Henry Cavill, because of General Zod, which is probably one of the best villains that we have in this decade. There is a lot to like here. But sadly, at the time, it was not received well. And I think my dear uncle here got to live out through that timeline there. Mm-hmm. So, before you give your thoughts, Colin, why don't you run through what everyone was feeling like towards this, what the hype was, and was there any booing in the theaters? Because there
No.
was probably at least a couple.
No, like here's the thing. People believe everything they see on the internet, and it's now become a big thing because I'm firmly the belief that Disney are basically masters of rejecting any blame from themselves and zeroing in on things that are real, like review bombing and things like that, and trolls on the internet. But they pretend like those things never existed prior to Disney movies. You know, when Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker weren't being received well. They're like, oh, it's just a bunch of racist, sexists on the internet. Look at this one comment, you know? When in reality, there's a lot of people who just genuinely didn't like it, you know? And in all honesty, Man of Steel wasn't poorly received when it came out. It was received about as well as the Marvel movies at the time. And that's the other thing people forget is that people went so crazy for Marvel later on, once you got like the Winter Soldier and things that came late after that, that they forget that almost every single Marvel movie was getting the same reaction that Man of Steel was getting. Was like, oh, that was okay, but yeah, nothing terribly special. First Iron Man movie hit it out of the park. Nobody really cared for the first Incredible Hulk movie. Nobody really cared for the first Thor movie. I completely disagree with it, but people didn't really care for Captain America, the first Avenger. And then the Avengers comes out and everybody goes crazy. But now we flash forward a little over a decade later, and most people look back at the first Avengers and are like, that's actually not that great of a movie either. I think what happened is people got so caught up in one formula that Marvel was delivering. And this is why I've sort of the opinion, like, I actually, for the most part, prefer what DC did. Maybe not necessarily that DC produced all of the best movies, but them doing something different is what I appreciate. Because you look at Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, and then you look at Aquaman and Wonder Woman, and these all have their own feel to it. They're all a little bit more based in the real world, but they're all their own thing. And it's really just a different take because every Marvel movie, and people are caught onto this now, every Marvel movie is essentially exactly the same. There's no change in tones. The story structures are the same. They're all very Disney-fied. And this was doing something a little bit different. And I think this got a decent response when it came out, but it's only these internet complainers who are like, it's not Marvel. Look, it's not Marvel. It's like, okay, but who cares? And this also has sort of gotten grouped in with a lot of the hate from Batman v Superman, which again was probably the first movie to ever suffer from review bombing. You go on Letterboxd to this day and you look at every single DCU movie, and it's like two out of 5, 2.5. We're talking about the average reviews. Nothing is that bad, okay? So this movie sort of in years since has developed this reputation. People didn't like it, but I can't even count how many people who have said, you know, Man of Steel was actually a really good movie. It's just you didn't have that Disney marketing machine convincing people this is the only way to go. Now, for my background with this movie, just like I mentioned with Superman Returns previously, you know, I always go into a Superman movie very skeptical because this is my favorite superhero of all time and ultimately my favorite character of all time. And I've lived through, so talk about living through this, I lived through so many false starts to the Superman franchises this director's attached. We went through a lot of them last week, you know, the Tim Burton version, the Brett Ratner version, all of these, the J.J. Abrams version, that everything you heard about it, like, that's just horrible. And then you finally got Bryan Singer, who's like, this guy's doing it right. And I'm glad that Superman Returns now is getting this resurgence. People are like, no, that was a good movie.
Yeah.
But I went into Man of Steel not down on it, but very skeptical. And I'm going into the new James Gunn Superman the exact same way. My skepticism had to do partly with Zach Snyder. Not that I was, you know, somebody who dislikes Zach Snyder, but he had a very distinctive, gritty, R-rated style. You know, he did the remake of Dawn of the Dead. He did Watchmen. He's perfect for movies like that. I'm like, how is he going to do a movie about Superman who's supposed to be the symbol of hope, who's supposed to be the ultimate good guy? You know, the one that there's a little bit of majesty to Superman. How does he pull that off? And then it's like, okay, Christopher Nolan's doing it. And I think that's the most important thing for the background of the movie to talk about is that most people forget that Christopher Nolan was very involved in the early days of what's now known as the Snyderverse. It started as the Nolanverse. He was in the middle of developing The Dark Knight Rises, the third Dark Knight movie, when he sort of was hitting writer's block with David Goyer, his screenwriter. And just on a whim, they started talking about Superman because they couldn't figure out what to do with Batman. And they, on the spur of the moment, came up with the story. Now, let's also remember that later on when we talk about a lot of the Snyderverse defenders who are very anti-James Gunn right now. Why don't you go back and remember when Man of Steel came out and Christopher Nolan essentially did the same thing, stealing Superman away from Bryan Singer and Brandon Routh. This is the way it goes, okay? Like, you just move on. But I wasn't quite sure. I loved the Dark Knight movies, but I'm like, I don't know how any of this worked for Superman. And then the casting of Henry Cavill came about. Now, this is where I got on board because This is one of my pat yourself on the back moments. Uh, in the early 2000s, I saw two movies with Henry Cavill, like maybe a year apart. Now, in the first one, he was like 16 or 15 or 16 when he made it. It was a movie, an adaptation of The Count of Monte Cristo. And he played like the son in that movie, and he was a teenager. And I'm like, oh, this is a really good teenage kid. I typically can't stand teenagers or kids in movies. I'm like, this guy's pretty good. And then a year or so later, I saw a movie which was like a smaller British movie called I Capture the Castle, which was like a character drama, but Henry Cavill, he was like 18 or 19 when he made that movie, and he had clearly just hit puberty, clearly had a good physique. And I watched this movie and I looked at it and I'm like this guy should be Superman in 10 years. Now, this was 2003 when I'm watching the movie. And years pass, and all of a sudden we're in like 2011 or whatever when this movie's getting developed, and they cast Henry Cavill, and I look, I'm like, that's the guy that 10 years ago I said, give him 10 years, this guy'll be a perfect Superman. Your other uncle can confirm. I said this multiple times. I'm like, whenever they make a new Superman, this guy from this movie, I Capture the Castle, in a couple of years, he's the ultimate guy. And I got really excited for that. And I'm glad to say that I may be the one person who called his casting as Superman a decade ahead of time. But when the movie came out, I mean, I started to see like the trailers, and I'm like, okay, it looks like they're going for a little bit more of a gritty, reality-based Dark Knight tone, but it still has that optimism of Superman. And yeah, I like, I'm sure I'm going to be with the new Superman in a couple of days, and I was with Superman Returns. I saw it in theaters. I'm like, wow, I'm happy with that. Like, it's a different interpretation. And sorry, I'm going long-winded here. We'll get to the movie, but getting all of my biggest memories of being skeptical about this movie and being proven wrong out of the way. I've sort of, from the point of this movie on, I've always believed, and maybe even going back further to like, I'm a defender of like the Batman Forever, maybe even Batman and Robin to a certain degree. There are so many different interpretations and tones for different comics.
Yeah.
At any given time, you can have two or three different Superman or Batman series being published by DC in 1 week. And one comic may have a tone that is very much like, Batman Return or Superman Returns. Another comic being published at the exact same time will have a tone like this. This isn't unusual, but you get these movie fans who are caught up thinking there's only one way to do this. I'm like, no, what I like about Man of Steel, when I first saw it, I'm like, this is like when I read comics and you happen to get that one limited series of Superman that is doing a more realistic approach. And it kind of blew me away. And I ended up seeing it 3 times in theaters. And I don't even know how many times since then. So, yes, I've been a fan from this movie since day one. I'm a defender of this movie. And I also don't think that this movie is as hated as people think. I think there's just a lot of people who like to complain on the internet.
And how about that title, Man of Steel? Like, isn't that just like powerful? Like,
Well,
it's literally like, again, like you said, the gritty tone of a superhero movie. Again, they're combating like, oh, classic Captain America, but now we get like this classic, like it sounds so classic, and yet it's so realistic. Like Man of Steel, like
yeah.
that's an amazing title, personally.
And I think we briefly touched on what Bryan Singer's sequel to Superman Returns was going to be last week,
Yeah.
involving like a little bit more of the new Krypton, the sun, and stuff like that. But I don't even think we mentioned the fact that Bryan Singer had announced very soon after Superman Returns coming. We're talking about 2007. We're going to be calling the next Superman movie just Man of Steel. And this is before The Dark Knight even came out. So, I mean, obviously, this is playing on The Dark Knight. We're not going to call it Superman. We're going to call it whatever the subtitle is, right? Again, just remember that. And I have arguments on both sides. I think that there are a lot of people who probably owe a lot of the Snyder fans some apologies, because right now it's sort of like you reap what you sow. You sort of treated these movies with disrespect and review bomb these movies, and now you're complaining that they're going to do the same thing to the new movies. But at the same time, to these Snyderverse diehards who are like, let's boycott the movie, everything that is happening with this new Superman movie happened with Man of Steel. You had a director and a star where their movie wasn't quite at the same expectations, but people genuinely liked it. It was a good movie. They were developing a movie. They basically pushed them aside, and out of nowhere, because it's not that big of a gap. It was still 2010. They were still developing the Brandon Routh sequel. And then a year later, it's like, no, we're going in a different direction, which is the same thing happened with the Spider-Man movies,
With Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire. And
then again with Tom Holland. So this is just the way it goes. But even that title, Man of Steel, there was sort of the decision before even Christopher Nolan came on board. We like the idea of just calling it Man of Steel.
And again, like there's also someone else that needs to be praised, that we're going to be praising throughout this whole episode. Hans Zimmer. Like, you could not have gotten a better composer other than him. Like, he is the definition of amazing. and fantastic. He is the guy for the job. And if you want to compare what he was in the late 80s when or 70s, or whoever would be the big composer of
John
that time,
Williams, yeah.
John Williams.
Yeah.
So getting Hans Zimmer for this one, it's kind of a little bit of a poetry here because they got someone who was big at the time to do a magnificent composing for this movie and all the score, everything that leads up to the battles, the emotional moments. It's all in that third trailer song, An Ideal
Hmm.
of Hope,
Yeah.
which is arguably, maybe, potentially has a fighting chance against the original Man of Steel theme. I don't think it's better, but it has a fighting chance because it's original. It fits the mood of the movie, and it's like what you're talking about, the idea of hope,
Hmm.
the fact that people are being skeptical about the idea because like, oh, how are you going to do a Superman movie where you're dark and greedy because he's a symbol of hope, and yet this theme builds off that. Now I'm a little bit upset that they don't build it off that other theme in the other movies that come after this, but
Mm.
like, this is a good starting ground for them. And again, it confuses me why we didn't build off this theme. Did you want to touch quickly on Hans
Yeah.
Zimmer and the
Because
amazing theme here?
that was another thing that I was sort of skeptical about. Because again, I think the general consensus before anybody started seeing footage of this movie was, wow, you got Christopher Nolan, who I love him doing Batman, but this is not the style you need for Superman. You got Zack Snyder, I love him doing Watchmen, but that's not the style you need for Superman. You got Hans Zimmer. I love his music, but it's not what you need for Superman. And I think a lot of people sort of forgot that like Hans Zimmer's early stuff, he composed the score to The Lion King,
Yeah.
even if you get a little bit further to the more action stuff, Gladiator, I mean, that's like a very heroic soundtrack, but he was so known for the Dark Knight movies and stuff like Inception that was very wow, like big noisy, very experimental stuff that people sort of forgot that like this guy started by doing very emotional type music. And I thought, oh, how do you do this without the John Williams theme? And I love the theme he has, particularly the music that plays during the flight sequence. And then right at the end of the movie, I
Yeah.
think the track right at the end is "What are you going to do when you're not saving the world?" I can't even tell you how many times I listened to that. And is it something that people are going to think of when they see the Superman symbol? Do they, think in their head, dun, 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 dun? No, they're probably still thinking John Williams theme, but it suits it still. And when you hear that music, you still picture Superman. So yeah, another thing that like, it probably shouldn't have worked, but somehow it did work in this movie.
For me, for when you're saying that some people picture the Superman symbol with that theme, I actually have that theme like pictured in my head. Every time I see that Superman symbol, I get that first couple notes of da 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 da
Yeah.
da. It's just again, I grew up with the Superman. Like, this was my childhood superhero. Other than the fact that I liked Tobey Maguire at the time and Andrew Garfield, but this was my close third place for like my
Mm.
superhero movie for
Yeah.
like growing up. And I am so surprised that you didn't even show it to us. So, because we were so
Well,
interested in ape movies. But again, I
I,
keep making
I,
fun of you for not showing us movies that were great. So this tracks on.
the other thing to
Um,
consider is you were born in what year?
2003. So I would
You were 10
be
when this came out. Like,
10. Yeah, but I mean,
they
like,
were
still, like,
gearing towards an older audience, you know?
yeah. Well, I still feel like a kid can just be amazed at this movie. Like, the first time I've ever watched this movie, we were actually heading out to Gladstone, and I was like maybe 11 or 12, and we had these like special. I don't know. I think you might remember, but my other uncle, he had these special DVD players where you can just
Mhm.
put the disc in and just put the screen like on the seat and
Yeah.
like above it. And so we were going to pick out some movies, and then a couple of other people were like. They were like, I forget what the other ones. I know Seth picked Land Before Time because Seth's a dinosaur
Yeah.
person. But then as like I saw the Man of Steel. I'm like, okay, this looks interesting. And then we put it on the drive to Gladstone because that's where my grandparents live. And then after that, I like came out of that drive just being like I was like shocked. Like, it was, as a kid, like, I'm surprised that I liked it very much.
Mhm.
And I think that kids would still be able to enjoy this just because of the fact that Zack Snyder is a scene. It's like a masterpiece at directing, and
Yeah.
that's all you need him as. I am on the camp that maybe you don't bring him on as like a planner of a universe because it didn't really fan out
I,
because you wanted
I
to exit Justice League just not because of your own personal reasons, but because of family reasons. But
Yeah.
I still, I still would prefer, like, maybe if Nolan like stayed on and having Zack Snyder as the director there, I think they would have been a great duo there. But
Yeah.
we can only speculate on that.
I
But
just want to add two things. First of all, just on Zack Snyder. Again, there's a lot of people who are just anti Zack Snyder without really knowing anything about. What they're anti is they're anti his fan base, and any fan base that's like extremely diehard and loyal, it's like they get very passionate. His fan base is no different than Marvel's fan base, no different than Star Wars fan base, definitely no different than Star Trek's fan base.
I think their fan base is much worse than the Star Wars and Marvel and Star Trek. Personally,
Star Wars has probably the most aggressive, obnoxious fan base that exists.
but this fan base is probably the worst of the bunch because they are just like trying to boycott you, being like, there's a Reddit post of one of my YouTubers that I just watched, and there's like this Reddit post is being like, we Snyder fans, we need to rise up, not show up to James Gunn's Superman. Like,
but again, you're talking about a minority of a fan base of a couple people on the internet, which again is no different. Go back and look at the review bombing for the DC movies, which came from the Marvel fan base. That's how this thing started, it's no different than any of the fan base. The Star Wars fans, the Marvel fans, everything. It's literally no different. But just what I think people need to understand is Zack Snyder is probably the nicest guy you will ever see in any interviews.
Yes, absolutely.
Doesn't have any bad bone in his body. And on top of that, I don't think I can find any director alive today that has as loyal of a following among the actors who work with him. Nobody has ever said anything but like the most glowing things about him, to the point where when the Snyder Cut eventually got released, you look at the amount of people who came back who said, I will not have anything else to do with these DC movies. And then Zack Snyder said, they're going to let me do this movie. They're like, I'm on board. You don't even have to pay me. I'm there. There are people very loyal to him with good reason.
But then there's like, again, I don't know. I'm creating spectacle about it because I've seen a lot of the minority and just like getting all these trendy stuff again, and then James Gunn has to point out the tweet on his threads, which is like the Instagram version of Twitter. But it's one of these things that's like annoying, but it's like I'm kind of just sick of it at this point. Like, why can't people just move on?
And again, I see both sides of this, but let's also look at what the Snow White movie suffered, which is not a great movie. In fact, it's a downright bad movie, but it's getting trashed way beyond what it should. Look at what the Ironheart TV show is getting. I'm like, I started watching
it. They didn't market it at all. There was maybe one ad that I have gotten in the last like 3 months that was about Ironheart. Like,
I started watching Ironheart. The first episode bored me to tears. The second episode was like, it's slightly better. I haven't gotten any further than that. But the biggest complaint people are having about this whole thing about the line she has about, oh, you think Tony Stark would be Iron Man if you didn't have $1 billion? And people are like, that's not fair. That's not fair. But that's the way Marvel fans are. And yet I watched that scene after reading this criticism, and I'm like, the entire point of her argument is, I've developed my technology and I don't have the money to go anywhere from here, which is exactly what Tony Stark had. So anyways, just long story short, all fans are exactly the same, but there's certain marketing departments that are better. And James Gunn learned well from Disney, so he is able to call these things out, whereas in the past, nobody would really address these things. So it's something that comes to light more because you have good marketing people out there focusing on that. The Elio thing. Disney goes out there and Elio bombs, and they're like, oh, you ask us for original movies and now you won't go see it. It's like, oh, come on, Disney. You've produced tons of original movies people saw.
This is probably that was probably less marketed than Ironheart. And that says a lot.
Elemental came out, had a barely non-existent opening weekend, and then went on to make well over $100 million. This is Disney at its finest. It is, our movie didn't do well. Let's blame a minority on the internet for it. Anyways, we should get to Man of Steel.
Yeah, we absolutely should. We had enough argument with that. Is there any interesting history tidbits that you have for this movie? Like any development thing or any changes that they made or...
No, I'll give two things really quickly. One is the casting of Henry Cavill. Henry Cavill had been, and this wasn't even known until Man of Steel came out, but he had been basically almost locked up for, I think it was the J.J. Abrams version of Superman a couple years prior. So there was a point in time where he was looking like he almost would have been Superman, which was the exact same thing that happened to Brandon Routh. And I think I alluded to that in the Superman Returns episode. The other thing is just on the connection between Henry Cavill and Russell Crowe, because this has become a very fun story that a lot of people have probably heard. But Henry Cavill, before he really got into acting, he was a background extra in a Russell Crowe movie. Russell Crowe movie called Proof of Life, which was like a kind of a hostage negotiation movie.
Hmm.
Came out in 2000. And they had filmed at Henry Cavill's boarding school that he was going to. And he was playing rugby. And they just said, can we just have these kids playing rugby in the background? So it's not like Henry Cavill has a line in the movie. It wasn't even like he was a paid actor. They're literally just filming saying, you're playing rugby. Russell Crowe, as they were filming it, were just watching the kids play rugby. And he specifically noted one kid that was just dominating over everybody else. Like, man, this one kid is incredible, which was Henry Cavill. Then he said later on, this same kid came up to him and just started talking to him when nobody else was around him. And he said he always remembered that one kid because this kid just took it on himself, come up and I'm kind of interested in maybe getting into acting. What advice would you give me? And so when Russell Crowe wrapped the movie, he decided he wanted to send like an autograph picture to the kid that played his son in the movie. And then he had one more. He said there was one kid. He basically went to his reps and said there was one kid at the school who's playing rugby. I think his name is Henry. I just want you to give him this autograph picture. And it was basically an autograph picture of Russell Crowe in Gladiator that has, one of the lines from Gladiator is the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step or whatever that line is.
Yeah, yeah.
And Henry Cavill got that like months later after he just happened to be, filming at his school and he went up and talked to him briefly. And Henry Cavill then said when he started to get into acting, he would basically go out to Los Angeles, spend 3 months in Los Angeles until his money ran out, not get any jobs, then have to go back to England, take some little dinky jobs here and there, work as like a bartender or waiter or something like that, go back to Los Angeles, get no roles, have to go back to England. And this went on for years. And he said every single time when he was in Los Angeles and nothing was taking off for him, he always had that picture up. And it would always remind him just stick with it because of the Russell Crowe picture. So then flash forward to them filming this movie. And on the first day where Henry Cavill and Russell Crowe are on set together, Russell Crowe's just looking at him saying, he's like, yeah, it's like, I know we're doing this movie together. I know you're playing Superman, but like, you look familiar. Like I've seen you before. And Henry Cavill's like, actually, I met you when I was a kid. You filmed at my school. And then he just thought to himself, he's like, you were the rugby kid, right? I sent you an autograph picture. And he goes, yeah. And so now the punchline is being, he says, oh, I remember you came up and you asked me about acting. I don't even remember what we specifically talked about. And Henry Cavill said, well, I asked you, what is it like to be an actor? Tell me what I'm getting into. And Russell Crowe looked right at him. This is when Henry Cavill was a kid. He says, they treat you like crap, but the pay is really good. And Russell Crowe's like, that sounds like something I would say. Yeah. So Henry Cavill, we basically have Russell Crowe to thank for Henry Cavill sticking with acting and eventually landing Superman. And then they finally get to play father and son.
Well, it didn't turn out to Henry Cavill very much because after that he got fired and then he got rehired and he got fired.
I think he's doing okay though.
No, I think he's fine. Like I honestly actually really liked him in Enola Holmes. I think he was actually perfect for
amazing. Yeah. I mean,
so,
look at the franchise. He's Mission Impossible, Enola Holmes. Like there's no stopping this guy. This guy's going to be huge. He already is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Superman just started to trajectory to the right way, and now he's just becoming one of the best actors in the world. Yeah. But we'll have to wait and see. Maybe he'll get casted as Captain Britain for Marvel, but we'll have to wait and see. Let's get going. We're going to get going here. We'll see how long this takes. I actually have this whole paragraph saying under 2,000 words, so there might be
there's a lot of action in this, and it's going to speed up quite a bit in the second half.
Exactly. So we got 2 stops to make, Colin, for your comments and stuff. I'll let you know when we get there, but we're gonna start here with the most extensive birth scene I've ever seen in a movie with Kal-El and Laura giving birth to Kal-El. And again, genius, Hans Zimmer, amazing score. There's nothing topping that right now. And then we get to go to the Court of Elders where Kal-El is confronting the elders about them using the sun's energy to power up Krypton, which is now corrupting Krypton itself, which we'll get more into it later because Russell Crowe will go a little bit more deeper into that when we actually get to meet him. And now we get, which wasn't really explained in the last Super reboot because it's just a bunch of them sending Zod away and then the planet blew up. But I'll get a little bit more exposition on that here. And then we get this thing with Jor-El explaining that that he has the Codex and that he can save the race. And he was about to say he has a son, but now we have Zod coming in, and he and his not so merry men and women, and they come to ruin the court and state his opinion and arrest the elders. And Zod tries to recruit Jor-El to his side. Jor-El escapes and he starts to go to get ready for the launch, but first he has to go get the Codex from the center of Krypton. And he gets the Codex, and then he comes back to his wife on a flying little beast. And then, and then they have a debate where she doesn't want to send Kal-El to Earth, and it's kind of like the same little debate that we got from actually Superman 1, so it's a little bit similar to that. And then we get Zod coming in, and as he is killing Jor-El very quickly, the ship actually gets launched to Earth. They try to fire it down, but the rulers and the elders fire on the ship and arrest Zod. And they bring Zod to a court, and they sentence him to 300 or so light years around a black hole sinkholes. Yep.
Cycles. Sinkholes.
Sinkholes. And then they sentence him to the black hole. Zod reacts and confronts the elders, being like, Jor-El was right. You guys are corrupt pieces of crap. And he also confronts Laura and saying, I will find your son. And your little dog too. I guess, I don't know. There's no Krypto in this one, sadly. But
there's a dog.
What?
There's a dog.
There was a dog?
Well, the Kents have a dog.
Oh,
that's
yeah,
where Jonathan.
right,
that's where Jonathan dies.
Right. And they grew up in Kansas. I made up Wizard of Oz pun without even noticing. Okay, so and then we get a beautiful, a sad but beautiful scene. Again, we've talked about it before, where Hans Zimmer is able to bring out these emotions through his score, and so we have an amazing, beautiful score with Laura and Krypton destroyed. And again, I can't sing enough praises for Hans Zimmer. We'll be singing that a lot in this movie recap. And then we have the ship arriving at Earth, crash on a farm, and then we actually do a little bit of a time jump to around the present time that we get for this movie, where we have a bunch of fishermen, and Kal-El happens to be on board. And then there's a hoverpad that was close by that was set on fire. He goes out to rescue it. He then rescues a bunch of people. He stays behind to try and save a little light pole from landing on top of the helicopter. And then we get some more flashbacks after he gets dunked in the ocean, where with him in school feeling like an outcast. His powers start kicking in. He sees X-rays. He's hearing a lot of bells and everybody's voices. And then he just goes and hides in a closet due to his frustration. We actually get a nice little thing here where he actually uses his heat vision to not his heat vision, but his eyes to light up a doorknob to heat it up a little bit. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then we get to his mom coming in to try and give him a monologue about him controlling his powers secretly. Because, again, they want to keep him a secret throughout this movie, and we're going to get a little bit more of that theme throughout this whole first half of the movie. And, again, it's a beautiful scene. Hans Zimmer brings out more epic music, more emotional music, which is amazing. And we then come back to the ocean, where Clark swims back to shore, steals some clothes for himself. So, shoot, man, you're just a little scumbag, just stealing clothes from people. That's really, really honest and really hopeful of you. So
we know that he sent them like a $20. He sent them he sent them a $20 bill in the mail.
Yeah,
we know that's what Clark would do.
No, I sure hope so. If he didn't, then I would be very upset. And so then he does that, and then we get actually a fast forward again. We actually get a flashback again to maybe his middle teens or maybe early grade 9, maybe, to where he was on the bus. A kid is bullying him. A girl, maybe Lois Lane, maybe
it's Lana.
It's Lana. Never mind.
They say it's Lana. Yeah.
I thought I was gonna make a little bit of a joke that it was Lois Lane because of your little thing that
the Superman the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. So sad, very sad. But anyways, well, maybe Lois was on the bus. Who knows? But
well,
Liz wasn't specified, but at least maybe there might be a cameo there. But what the big thing happens here is that while the bully is bullying Clark, the wheel actually blows up. Maybe it was Superman. Maybe he was trying to get revenge on the bully, but I don't know. But it so happens that they swerve, fall off the bridge. Clark's dad, I forget his name, but he is there. Jonathan Kent. I completely forget. Again, I'm smart, people. I promise, I'm smart. And then he happens to be there and sees this whole first shit happen. Clark ends up bringing the bus up to the shore, goes back and rescues his bully, actually, which is kind of cute. And then the mother of the kid comes to confront the family about this whole thing. And then his dad actually then talks to Clark because he's outside, sitting on the craft, feeling bad about himself, being like, I wanted to help. And his dad gives him a little bit of a talk about responsibility and him making the choice whether he's evil or not. Because we actually had, because throughout this movie and throughout when Jonathan Kent's alive, when we have these talks, he's always being like, you have these special gifts, but you got to decide what kind of man you want to be and hold this responsibility. So, does that remind you of Spider-Man? Maybe. I don't know. And then we come back to the present with Clark working at a bar. Apparently from the movie, when we get later on with Lois reviewing these people, the girl mentioned that he was only working there for a couple minutes. And the guy is trying to hit on a girl. Clark stands his ground to try and help her, but he holds back on going mayhem on the guy because he's throwing beers at him. He's trying to push him around, trying to be a big, beefy guy, and he ends up leaving, so he doesn't do anything to him. Clark gets a ride to the city, or out to his next job, which is out in the Arctic, and this is where we get introduced to Lois Lane, who is investigating something out in the Arctic. She makes a really bad joke about a jacket, which again, I'm not a big fan of, but it didn't even get me a good chuckle there. And apparently, this ship that was investigated in the mountains of the Arctic is 20,000 years old. Mm. And apparently, when we get information later on, that it was a scout ship that was originally there. So we'll get more into that when we get there. She then actually does her classic Lois Lane and goes out to investigate everything, including seeing Clark check out the ship, which is the main reason why he's there, because he wants to find out who he was and where he comes from. And as he finds it, he puts the codex stick thingy inside the keyhole. Little robot tries to attack him. He ends up pushing the keyhole in, and then it just stops attacking him, realizing that the key is in, and Jor-El's memory and hologram gets uploaded to the ship. And then Lois, as she's trying to take a picture of this robot, a different robot actually, she gets attacked, and Clark heals her again with his eyes, which is actually pretty cool. I actually like it. Way better than Force Awakens crap that they do. Sorry, Rise of Skywalker crap that they do. So good on you for being better than Rise of Skywalker.
Everything is better than Rise of Skywalker. Jurassic World Rebirth is better than the Rise of Skywalker.
Is that saying much, Colin? Are you alluding to your review that's coming out tomorrow? Not tomorrow.
Yesterday. The people already heard.
Whatever. And then he takes the ship and leaves Lois basically in the Arctic, hoping for someone to come and rescue her. And now we come to Lois trying to explain everything that's happened to her and explain her article to Perry White, who I actually like in this movie. He's actually a pretty good actor. Yeah. And then he tells her to not publish the article. She actually then goes out of her way to meet someone on a sketchy site, and then he ends up publishing the article for her. And then Clark continues to actually explore the ship, and Jor-El's hologram appears, and he explains everything that's happening, including why Zod reacted the way he did, what happened to the elders choosing to harvest their core their planet's core to energize everything, and how that was the cause of their death, not by the red sun, which is a little bit convoluted to the comics, but I think there might be a little bit of argument for that to why they did it in this one. And then after this whole explanation, Jor-El gives him this suit, and it looks fantastic. And personally, I'm against the underwear. Not saying that I hate the underwear, but it looks a lot better without it. But I mean,
so you prefer the no red trunks?
I prefer the no red trunks. Yes.
Which can I just interject for a second? Personally. Just because I know I'll forget. I didn't make notes about this. I know I'm going to forget about it. But that was controversial at the time. But like DC had rebooted their entire comics universe in 2011, so 2 years before this movie came out.
Yeah.
And that design of losing the red trunks came from the comics at that point. But Zach Snyder has recently come out, or James Gunn, I guess, recently came out talking about the fact they've added the red underwear over top again. And what it came down to was that James Gunn called up Zach Snyder. And this is, again, for people who are like, oh, it was unfair what they did to Zach Snyder. No, it wasn't, okay? Zach Snyder has basically helped consult on this movie. But James Gunn called up Zach Snyder and said, listen, I'm really torn on whether the red underwear should work or not. And Zach Snyder said, he's like, I'm going to be honest with you. I wanted to include it, but we could not come up with the design for a suit that looked right on Henry where the underwear didn't become distracting. He's like, if you've got a guy and a suit design that will allow for that, you 100% should go with it. So it was never like, oh, this is cheesy. Why does he have red trunks over top? The comics had already tried that. And then when they were making this movie, like, it honestly on Henry Cavill looks better without it.
Okay. That is actually pretty cool. So Zack Snyder did get something to include in this in the new Superman movie. So Zack Snyder fans, stop
Yeah.
crying. Oh my goodness. And then we have to get this amazing flight sequence of him jumping around, him falling against a mountain, him trying to fly, falls through a mountain, which was a pretty funny and cool scene.
Mhm.
And then he ends up putting his fist on the ground, taking his first flight, and going around the world. Which again, music, fantastic, amazing score. We're gonna be singing praises throughout this whole thing. And now we actually come to the fruition that we are going to take our first break, do a little bit of debrief, maybe talk about a little bit of Krypton, because there was a lot of great stuff in Krypton.
Yeah.
And the amazing Hans Zimmer score, and maybe the sad excuse for a Fortress of Solitude remake. But Colin, go ahead and
Yeah.
give your little thoughts on whatever you want, and then we'll talk about these three things here.
Well, perfect place to start. I'll start with the Krypton stuff at the beginning because it's right at the beginning. So the first thing that struck me when I saw this, and I think we'd only seen glimpses of Krypton's destruction. It's really the Zod battle that was included in the trailers, but only a few shots here and there.
Yeah.
But as soon as I saw this movie, what I saw was my favorite era of Superman in the comics, which was from the 80s. There was a guy named John Byrne. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but John Byrne helped reboot Superman in the 80s. And this whole Krypton stuff screams of John Byrne because he brought in this very regal look for Krypton, whereas in the past it was very different. This is like they looked either more space age or they looked more, like angelic. And in this, it's like, no, they look like Egyptians half the time. They got these giant headdresses and big robes and stuff like that. The architecture has sculptures and hieroglyphics and stuff. And that's very much like a 1980s John Byrne Superman style they had there, which also goes along perfectly with them introducing the idea here of no natural birth on Krypton, but that they're kind of harvest their humans. That also was something that was introduced during the John Byrne era in the 80s of Superman, which if anybody really wants to read the best of Superman, go back to it when John Byrne started in, I think it was 86 or 87. Best Superman stuff that the comics ever had. But yeah, this all came from the comics, and it's interesting as an idea. I don't know whether I love the idea because I think they're introducing it as a way to make Kal-El stand out more. They also needed to have something. I feel like you could have done something without having it be we literally harvest our humans. That's something I feel like it worked better in the comics than it does in this movie. Because in the movie, what it does, and this is just a pet peeve I have in movies, the idea of everybody has to be a chosen one, which really started with the Phantom Menace. Now, what works about the Phantom Menace is that the end of the story is this chosen one's going to ruin everything. It's not like it's Neo in the Matrix where like, oh, he's the chosen one. To me, as soon as you say somebody's a chosen one, they're untouchable. That there's no tension, there's no drama. That they have to be so much bigger and more important. I'm not a fan of the Harry Potter movies, books, or anything. Your Auntie Jamie is. I've watched them with him before. I decided I'm going to throw you a bone. We'll rewatch the Harry Potter movies. Mostly I can mock them as I'm watching them. And I told her, I'm like, it's terribly late 90s, early 2000s to say somebody has to be a chosen one. And then anytime they're in jeopardy, there's no tension, and them saying that like everything was encoded in Superman, the reason it works a little bit is because we don't find that out later on. But I just like the idea that if he was on Krypton, he'd be a regular guy. It's the fact it is his human upbringing that makes him Superman. And to set him apart from the other Kryptonians, not something I'm necessarily a fan of, but it is cool to have these little things from the comics here. Some of the things that like I never quite thought about, there's all these rules, and a lot of people get very confused about the Kryptonian culture, but there's all these rules that are very specific in the Superman universe for things like the way their names are. The names are hyphenated for the males. You have Jor-El, and it's including the house name. You are the House of El. Whereas the females' names, what they are is they have their own name, and male names are like one syllable, and female names are two syllables. But then females' last names are actually what their father's last name is. So Lara is Lara Lorvan because her father was Lorvan. She's not Lara L or anything, right? Whereas Kara, his cousin, would be Kara Zor-El. And if Jor-El had a daughter and named her Susan, she would be Susan Jor-El, but he is Kal-El. But something that had never even really occurred to me when I watched this is what they call each other. So Zod... there's a couple of versions. I think the most common one is his name is Drew Zod, like Dru-Zod, but everybody knows him as Zod. So in this movie, until you actually think about that, you don't realize how odd it is that they're calling him Zod. But then you have Zod calling Jor-El, and I'm like, whoa, this actually just made sense to me for the first time ever. They should not be calling him Zod unless Zod's calling him El, and him calling him El is like, if you're trying to get aggressive with somebody, I'd be like, listen up, Clausen. I wouldn't say listen up, Patrick. I'd say listen up, Clausen.
Yeah,
And then at the same time, you have Lara, who's referring to Jor-El as Jor in this movie. I'm like,
yeah.
okay, in reality, she would be referring to him as Jor. It's just you don't think about these things until you really are forced to think about them. I love all the action stuff we get on Krypton when the rebellion starts because Zack Snyder he avoids things looking too artificial because you have a completely
Yeah.
artificial landscape, which is like a barren landscape. There's also a new way of looking at Krypton is like it's desolate. This is a planet on the verge of death, like you sort of mentioned. I think that's okay. I personally like the idea of our planet is going to be destroyed and we're too arrogant to do anything about it. But them just
Mhm.
sort of adding the idea of we've wrecked our planet. It's a little bit more of a human way of looking at it, but oh well. But the fact they gave it this desolate landscape, so you can see there's a reason why this planet is being destroyed here.
Mhm.
But the fact that like he uses handheld shaky cameras, even if it's a completely CGI shot, you'll see the camera kind of wobble a little bit, and that just it gives you that realism. Whereas too many movies look so artificial these days because your brain is programmed to know you could not do that with a real camera.
Yeah.
And so many people miss this when they watch these movies. Like, that's not a natural shot. If you couldn't do it with the real camera, you will perceive that as this is fake. But if you see something like a little bit of a camera vibration, it looks like it's handheld, your brain's going to accept, even if you know it's a completely CGI shot, completely differently because you're like, well, that's the way you would do it with a camera. The stuff after the destruction of Krypton. Oh, first of all, I'm going to have a complaint later on when we meet Jor-El because let's just remember Jor-El dies here. This is
Yeah.
differently. He's murdered. But that is before the destruction of Krypton. So let's just remember that for a little bit later on. I do want to comment that the actress they got to play Lara, I don't know if she's done a lot of things. She's an Israeli actress
Mm.
who had done, yeah, so she had done Angels and Demons, which was one of the Tom Hanks Da Vinci Code movies. She'd done Munich, which was like the movie about the Israeli terrorist attack or the terrorist attack on the Israeli athletes at the Olympics.
Yeah.
Only a couple movies. But she would later go on to do the Daredevil TV series, if you remember. She
Oh
played.
yeah, and I see her. She actually is in the new Born Again as Vanessa
Yeah,
Fisk. So.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So we get another superhero thing. She's very good. Like Laura's a very difficult character to pull off because she does take a backseat to Jor-El unless you give her own storyline. And I feel
Yeah.
like even though with limited screen time and we have less than 20 minutes with all of this Krypton stuff, she stands out way more of a character than any other Laras we've seen before.
Yeah.
And an interesting question, or not question here, but interesting trivia bit here. One of the actresses they were looking at to play Lara was Connie Nielsen, who would later go on to play Wonder Woman's mom in the Wonder Woman movies and the Justice League universe. So,
Hmm.
Zack Snyder obviously had as a producer say over those things, so he probably just kept her around a little bit. Yeah, so once we get to immediately Clark Kent's backstory stuff, um, one of the other things I was very skeptical about with this movie is that when they first announced, when Christopher Nolan first came out and said, we're producing a new Superman movie, I've co-written the story. He specifically said it will not be an origin story. And I was very opposed to doing another origin story. I feel like you can reboot a franchise a lot more successfully if you're not rebooting, because rebooting is essentially saying, we want you to forget the other one. We're going to do it better. And then all of a sudden, all this stuff started coming out with this movie where they cast young Clark Kent and we were going to see him in the Arctic and all these things, we're going to be like, this is his backstory. Why
Yeah.
are we getting another origin? I feel like this works only because you break it up with that non-linear storytelling, which is 100% a Christopher Nolan thing. You watch any Christopher Nolan movie, this is what he does. You don't know where you are in the timeline. Have you ever seen the movie Dunkirk?
No, I have not.
Oh, check it out.
I've never heard of it.
Dunkirk. It was probably the best movie Christopher Nolan ever made. Well, second best movie he ever made. It was a
I've
World War
never
II
heard of
movie a
it.
couple years ago.
I've never heard
Tom
of it.
Hardy.
I know Tom Hardy.
Yeah,
I never heard of this movie. No.
great movie, amazing movie. But this is Christopher Nolan style going back and forth. But it actually helps me accept the backstory more because otherwise you feel like you're just redoing it all over again. Instead, they're using the backstory in this movie as just a way to enhance whatever current scenes you're seeing. So you're seeing Superman fall into the water, and then you're flashing back and remembering something that relates to that scene. So it's a different way of presenting it. But this oil rig scene. So this is a very important sequence. It holds a dear place in the heart of your Auntie Jamie.
Oh, let me guess. The big abs, the
Yeah,
mustache, the beard. the
let's
goatee.
let's just say before this movie came out, your Auntie Jamie, who is notoriously a very superficial person,
Yeah.
she kept seeing the trailers for this, and she was saying, "Yeah, I'm interested to see the movie, but to be honest, that new guy playing Superman doesn't look handsome enough." And that's all she kept saying over and over again. So we went into this movie with her being like, "Oh, this guy, he's not as handsome as the other Supermans." And then all of a sudden, the scene happens where you see him step through the fire with his rippling abs and his pecs, stepping through flames. And no joke, you're
And then she was just went like,
she grips my arm with like a vice grip my arm, and she literally goes right up my ear. She goes, "Oh my goodness." And she's like tensed up the whole movie. This man has that effect over pretty much every woman on the planet. I think outside of Sean Connery in his prime during the James Bond days, I don't know if there's any other male actor that women have swooned over as much as Henry Cavill. Just naturally, even just the way he presents himself. There are so many interviews, the hilarious videos on the internet. You'll see a press junkets from things like Mission Impossible, Enola Holmes, things like that, where Henry Cavill will be doing interviews with his female co-stars, and just watch the female co-stars. They are literally ogling him, or they're just like, like sighing for a guy they've worked with for months in interviews on television. It's hilarious watching his female co-stars standing next to him. And Henry Cavill's just like such a humble guy. He just doesn't realize it. But I literally wrote my review on Letterboxd for this movie. My entire review on Letterboxd just says, I believe Henry Cavill can fly, and he will steal my wife without even trying. This man has.
Where does she rank amongst the people with shirtless abs? Like,
well, not ranked specifically just on the abs, but her two favorite celebrities are Keanu Reeves and Henry Cavill, and it probably goes in that order: Keanu Reeves first, Henry Cavill second. But yes,
so Keanu Reeves can steal her without even trying.
Much easier, much easier than Henry Cavill.
Has he been shirtless ever in his career?
Keanu Reeves, he was completely naked in the Matrix. Did you see the Matrix?
No.
I mean, he dropped down like to 150 pounds or something like that for that scene, because it's a scene where you're seeing him born in the real world, and he's basically coming out of a pod like the Kryptonians are born in, right? Mm-hmm. So he's Skeletor, and he's got no eyebrows and no hair and everything. But anyways, yeah. So, but yeah, I'll never forget that one moment where she went from, "This guy's not handsome enough," to, "Oh my goodness."
Just gripping your arm, just being like,
yeah, that's what it was literally like. That's what it was literally like. So this bully that you talked about. So I don't know how well versed you are in the Superman lore and everything, but this bully's identified by name in this. This is a very important character. This is Pete Ross. So they say they don't identify it until after I think this sequence is over, after he's bullying him on the bus. And by the way, I love there's the one insult that Pete gives to Clark when he smacks him across the head. He calls him a dick splash. And I'm like, I don't know what that means, but it sounds great, This whole sequence is, the revelation of his powers. But the fact that they made this Pete Ross made it perfect, because in the comics, Pete Ross was Clark's best friend growing up in Smallville. And he was the only character he revealed his powers to outside of his mother and father, until Lois finds out, much later in the comics. So Pete was the original, what's the Spider-Man phrase? Guy in the chair?
Guy in the chair. Yeah.
Yeah, he was like the original guy in the chair. So to have Pete Ross be the guy who's Clark's bully was an interesting twist on this, but also to keep it with that same backstory of, this is the one guy who knows. Other things in here is that he does that. The girl on the bus that was also witnessing him, when Pete's mother comes to the house and is talking to Jonathan, saying, "I know Pete saw what your son did." He then says, "And Lana saw it as well." So that's how you know this girl's Lana. But the third name he mentions is actually interesting, because it's a nod to the TV show Smallville. So they say the Fordman boy also saw it. Now, the Fordman boy you will technically see in a scene later on, but there were two original characters that were created for Smallville that didn't come from the comics. One was the bully, who was Lana's boyfriend, named Whitney Fordman. So they decided to include by name only a Smallville character in these Smallville sequences here in Man of Steel, which is just sort of like, oh, it's a nice, because that was really, I think for my generation, that was the Superman they grew up with, right? Mm-hmm. And by the way, I'm loving that Nicholas Hoult is out there basically going on and on about Michael Rosenbaum, the Lex Luthor from Smallville, talking about like, this was my Lex Luthor and all that. And also, I'll get in a second when we get to Amy Adams about some other funny stories about people ogling Henry Cavill.
Oh my!
And then
gosh.
what? And then what?
I mean, she did have a bath with naked Henry Cavill, so I mean,
actually, I'll get to it now, because we'll talk about Lois. But Amy Adams has very publicly came out and basically agreed with your Auntie Jamie. So she is a happily married woman, but when she filmed these Superman movies, she talked about how she was constantly ogling Henry Cavill without realizing it, right? So he's
Mhm.
doing a scene and he's shirtless and he's just thinking, oh, okay, so we're gonna do this and this. And she's literally just sitting there with her jaw dropped and she's like, she would apologize to him. It's like, I'm so sorry. I gotta get away for a second, you know. And there was one scene where he was doing a shirtless scene, and Amy Adams literally said, "Please put a robe on. I cannot concentrate right now. You're too beautiful." But she actually has basically come out and almost been apologetic, saying like, "Yeah, I was like a creep to him," and she said it wasn't just me. She's like, "My husband couldn't stop staring at Henry Cavill when he was on set." She's like, "My 5-year-old daughter would be on set with me, and Henry Cavill would walk by, and her jaw would drop." You know, so, everybody is in love with Henry Cavill. But
Even
the
the
funny,
one-year-old baby is in love with Henry Cavill. Everybody's in love with
everybody
him.
that's the power this man has. But this is the story I found this past week that I just thought I'd share. I'll share it now while we're talking about people perving on Henry Cavill. So you would think, okay, are we going to get this same type of love for David Cornsweet? No, not necessarily. David Cornsweet was quoted this past week talking about how challenging it was to film Superman with Nicholas Hoult. David Cornsweet says, it's very difficult to stand that close to a man who's that charming and handsome or retain any sense of self-worth and confidence. So Nicholas Hoult is the guy in the Superman franchise now that people can't stop looking at and gawking at and ogling, but it's Superman himself who's looking at Nicholas Hoult, Lex Luthor, and being like, my God, you're a beautiful man. So
Lois looks like you have a challenger. Looks like you have a challenge.
maybe they should have cast Nicholas Hoult as Superman. I don't know. Maybe that's the
But then
reaction.
your but then your theory about your thing about them casting unknown actors as Superman is going to go wrong. Then
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
why
good
that's
point.
why they did David Cornsweet and Henry Cavill.
I know. When they were casting this movie, Nicholas Hoult was reported as having screen tested. So at first, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, Nicholas Holt's going to be Superman," and especially because James Gunn actually confirmed it. He's like, "Yeah, we did meet with Nicholas Hoult." So I think he fed into those rumors that Nicholas Hoult would be Superman, only to say no, he actually Lex Luthor. Which I'm happier with him as Lex Luthor because I cannot. If you've seen Fury Road yet, or you've still only seen Furiosa?
I've only seen Furiosa, but once we get to our end of the year best of, I'm going to be checking out Fury Road.
Mad Max.
Before. Yeah,
Nicholas Hoult in Fury Road, Mad Max Fury Road. You will see what that man could do as a villain. It's amazing. Anyway, so getting back to the story here. So yeah, Pete Ross being the bully is kind of interesting. The scene with Jonathan where he's consoling Clark, where he's talking about the bus and why am I freaking everything. He's saying to him, it's like, should I have just let them die? And Jonathan's like, maybe, I don't know. And he says, look, I don't have all the answers. We're kind of making this up as we go. Like he says that, right? And that's something I'm going to use to defend the scene where he dies later on that a lot of people are critical of, because we get a flawed Jonathan Kent here. He's making decisions that he thinks are best. And this checks out as a parent. You're constantly making decisions as a parent. Your parents have definitely been there. It is very dry today. It escaped through. Wonder why I'm coughing so much.
well, I came out this morning to go to church and I'm like smelling like that's not smoke. Is smoke really back in the city? Like, oh
yeah, and look, we've had a heat wave, and today was the first day where the temperature was cool enough to go running outside. Yeah. So I ran 8 kilometers outside with air quality that you probably shouldn't be running in. So that's definitely contributing here.
Well, Colin, you should probably grow like a brain like me, just being a little bit more smarter then, just a little bit more.
Just creeping cancer of falsehoods here.
Well, it's gonna come to you eventually since you're on the show, so it's gotta happen sooner rather than later.
I love that, like, Jonathan Kent says, I make mistakes. And this makes sense to me because you're constantly making mistakes. You're like, you know what? That didn't really work. You're like, it probably worked on some level, but we won't know for another 20 years whether this worked in the long run, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that's very good in the script here. The other part where he actually reveals, like, this is the ship, this is how you came to us. I love the one moment we get from Kevin Costner here where the young Clark is basically saying, like, I'm not your son or whatever. And then Kevin Costner has this brief moment where he kind of like tears up a little bit, goes, you are my son. That one moment is like, whoa, man, this man is so good. Kevin Costner might be one of the greatest actors on the planet. Love everything the guy does. The Yellowstone TV series, even these Horizon movies he's trying to get off the ground. Saw the first one. I'm like, man, this is so much fun. I love this. But he so perfectly fits Jonathan Kent here. Martha, on the other hand, Diane Lane. Another thing I was very skeptical about when this movie came out, because it's not that Diane Lane's not a great actress, but if you see Diane Lane in anything else outside of Man of Steel, she is always like super, super glamorous. Like it would be like taking the most glamorous actress in the world and saying you're going to be farm wife, Martha Kent.
Yeah.
and it just didn't make sense. They do an incredible job of just doing little things, give her a couple of gray streaks in her hair, make her a little bit messier, a little bit more country-ish, where it's like, okay, it makes sense. But it was a tough pill to swallow to think that Diane Lane would be able to pull off Martha Kent at once upon a time. But then the
Yeah.
scene they have here, the way that she plays it, where Clark's in the closet, with his powers going out. First of all, credit to them for really making you see why a kid would be freaked out by this. It's
Yeah.
not just I can see through. Like, it looks terrifying what he's seeing because it's a
Yeah.
mixture of everything at once. But the way that she's like, pretend that my voice is an island and everything. I mean, again, these are flashbacks that are tying into the present scenes. Don't even bother editing out my coughs.
No, I was never going to. Don't worry.
Let this be a reminder, people, when you got wildfires in Manitoba, do not take advantage of cool weather to go running outside.
It is a reminder to you personally, not just everybody. But
that would only work if I ever listened to the show, and I'm above that.
Hey, we have like almost 200 listeners right now on Podbean, which, by the way, thank you. We have hit our milestone.
Thank you to 200 people who got nothing better to do with their time. The scene where he's at the truck stop or bar or whatever.
Yeah.
Henry Cavill's acting when he gets hit in the back, and even when the guy pushes him, because he doesn't even budge him. And the way he looks up like, it wasn't like, that didn't hurt me. It's like, it wasn't, his reaction was simply like, I'm kind of hurt. Like, why would you do that? And then when he's walking away, it's not even embarrassed. It's just like this look of, I can't do anything, and it kind of sucks. But then the audience gets that moment, which I got to tell you, all 3 times I saw this in the theater, the biggest eruption of cheers when they saw the guy's truck being impaled on all the telephone poles and electrical poles. Such an incredible moment. I love that.
Right.
And then Lois arriving in the Arctic stuff here. The fact that she hands her bag to Clark and then doesn't realize this is even Clark. Again, I always say Clark Kent is a persona. If you don't pay any attention, if the characters on screen are dismissive of him, it makes sense. Mm-hmm. She does not look at him and be like, my God, you're a beautiful man. She looks at him and says, be careful with that. It's heavy. Now, he is clearly a big guy, but she feels the need to tell him, oh, you'll want to be careful. That's a heavy bag, which also got the biggest laugh because the way Henry Cavill just stands there, he goes, he just nods. Okay. Because the audience barely even realizes him, but she had to tell him, be careful. That's heavy. That's great. The doctor here, Dr. Emil Hamilton. Again, I don't know how well versed you are in the Superman universe. Very important character in all of DC. He was basically like the head scientist at Star Labs. He kind of becomes the go-to scientist to help Justice League characters. So Emil Hamilton is an important character. And Richard Schiff, Seth would recognize him if he were here right now. He played Eddie Carr in The Lost World. That was one of his first. He's most well known for the TV show The West Wing, but
yeah,
The Lost World, the second Jurassic Park movie, he's the guy who's trying to help pull the trailer back up and gets eaten by the T-Rex in his Jeep while flooring it in reverse. Amazing actor, and watching the behind the scenes footage, she's just hilarious because the behind the scenes on the Blu-ray of this is actually quite clever. You essentially are watching the movie, but then they will have the documentary come up in different corners of the screen where you got the movie in the middle and then you got an actor on top literally standing there talking about the scene while you're showing behind the scenes stuff. Richard Schiff comes up for the first time. He goes, hey, I'm Richard Schiff. I play Dr. Emil Hamilton. He's on screen right now. And you're watching him say this, right? He goes, he's the good looking one. That's all I gotta say right now. Maybe you'll hear from me later. This guy says I'm the good looking one when he's with everybody else.
He's trying to get other people to glamour at him, just like how people are glamoring at Henry Cavill.
He wanted that Amy Adams reaction, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But he didn't get it. Exactly.
But so what's interesting here is that we get introduced to Emil Hamilton in a scene where we see another actor who played Emil Hamilton. If you even caught it, there's a guy with glasses who's on the computer throughout this movie in the Arctic scenes. He's like Emil Hamilton's assistant. He's the guy watching the security footage and everything. Mm-hmm. That actor played Dr. Emil Hamilton in the TV show Smallville. He was on for 3 seasons on Smallville. So it wasn't just that he did a one-off guest spot. Like, this was my generation's Emil Hamilton in a scene with next generation's Emil Hamilton, even though the actor is younger and all that. But I'm going to defend Amy Adams a little bit here. I don't think that her character is the most important in this movie she's ever been. Or I would say she's not the most entertaining she's ever been. But I feel like her importance to this story is probably way bigger than it ever has been before. we see her as a real life reporter. She's showing up here, and even when they get in the room, she says, "Where'd I go to the bathroom?" Like, "Oh, there's a bucket in the corner." She's like, "All right, whatever." It doesn't even bother her. She goes out with her camera. She gets tossed around and all that. She's
Yeah.
looking for the story, but most importantly, she figures out who Clark Kent is like that, which we'll talk about coming up
Hmm.
here. But what we see as her as a reporter totally makes sense, and I think that a lot of people downplay the chemistry she has with Henry Cavill because it's very different this one. We're not seeing them playing the dual identities. She literally meets this guy as Clark Kent, and then she discovers him as Clark Kent, and she only finds out
Hmm.
about the Superman thing later on. So they're just sort of play on
Yeah.
that. And for the way they did the story, I actually think she's good. And we should also notice she's probably the most acclaimed actor in this movie because she's been nominated for half a dozen Academy Awards or something like that. Um, but yeah, this scene where they're in the Arctic and she basically got a gushing thing in her chest, and we get to see Superman do something that you never thought you'd see Superman powers used for, which is I need to
Yeah.
cauterize the wound in your abdomen. We don't see it, but just hearing her scream, like, "Oh, I didn't expect Superman would have to do that."
Hey, this is their excuse for making up his power for Superman, just like the Christopher
Yeah,
Reeve movies. So they're actually
I
doing it.
mean,
They're actually following up on that pretty well.
and they're just using a power, saying like, "What are the cool things?" This is like when Christopher Nolan and David Goyer were doing writer's block on Dark Knight Rises, and they're like, "Oh, can you imagine what Superman could do with heat vision? He could cauterize a wound. If somebody was stabbed in the chest." That's how these things come about in the movie.
Again, a lot better than the Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah,
Kudos to you. Kudos.
much
I'm
better.
so
Yeah.
happy.
Lawrence Fishburne as Perry White, amazing.
Yes,
Of
agreed.
of course, we've already seen him in the Matrix and the John Wick movies, and I think that we almost missed it a little bit here. I think the interactions he has with Lois are my favorite things in the movie because I'm
Again, the smoke gone. You gotta stop
talking
running
too
when there's
long.
smoke.
I just need to shut up here. That's what I need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love their interactions because it just feels like a boss with the employee and all that. He's being very logical with what he's doing. He still has that Perry White energy, like the fast talking and I'm gonna put everybody down because I'm the boss. One complaint I have about the Jor-El scene with Superman is that I don't feel like he should have just been completely living flesh. I feel like there should have been something to make him look artificial. My reason for thinking that is when we see all the artificial intelligence holograms and everything on Krypton, it's just monochrome. It looks very simple and basic.
Hmm.
And if we're gonna see Jor-El, we should be seeing Jor-El with maybe a little bit of a hue around him, a little bit of a glow to him, something that just doesn't say he's a living flesh thing. Also, the fact that he describes everything that happens after he's dead. I don't know how he would be able to describe, like, this is his consciousness, and it would have to either be pulled from his brain or uploaded, or he would have to record these messages.
Hmm.
And from the point where Clark's ship takes off until he dies, there is no moment in there for his consciousness to be uploaded to this key to say, so Zod takes over our world and we're about to be destroyed. So that's just my little complaint I have, where it's like, it's kind of a plot hole here. But then what we get from the first flight here is amazing. The music that Hans Zimmer has, yeah, the way it's all edited together with the narration, it perfectly ties into the Marlon Brando stuff from Superman the movie. Even though you've been raised as a human being, you're not one of them. That whole speech.
Hmm.
Here we get these other things he gets to talking about. You need to just keep testing your limits. You've grown more
Yeah.
powerful than I could imagine you could have. All the narration stuff he has is so perfect for here. And then just the way that they build on this with the way he lifts off. The first time it's the flight in this movie is just like boom, boom, boom. Like it's unlike any type of flight you've seen before. But then the best part is the second time where he flies after he crashes.
Yes, when he's just like doing the
Yeah,
ground
he's
thing
got
and
his
it just
fist
lifts
down,
off.
and you see just little rocks levitating, which will perfectly tie into the end of Batman v Superman when we see the dirt on the grave. Yeah, just those little details are fantastic. Even just the joy that Henry Cavill gets to have, where he's like laughing and cheering, woohoo, having a little
Yeah.
bit of fun with this. And also just to quickly add on that, the final flight thing here, or the first flight thing, was that it starts out with leaping, so he doesn't know how to fly here.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to bring that up when we get to Jonathan's death again. But the reason that makes sense is because Superman in the comics didn't originally fly. It only came like a year or two later when it made the transition to radio. It always started with he could leap tall buildings in a single bound.
Hmm.
So maybe the earliest issues of Superman, he doesn't fly. He does exactly what Henry Cavill does in the opening here. A giant leap up in the air, and then he comes down, and then he leaps again. It's just constantly leaping, almost like a frog that can go hundreds of feet in the air.
Yeah.
So they start him with that before they get to the flight, which again, great nod to the comics. I need to take a drink of water. Go ahead.
I actually, before you take a drink of water, sorry, I want to actually touch on the fact that this ship is kind of a little bit of a sad excuse for Fortress of Solitude, which that's what I read it as. I don't know if that's what you read it as, but it's like, again, I understand the grittiness and the tone of it, but you could make the Fortress of Solitude very gritty, very
Yeah,
likely. Like, it's kind of a sad excuse for it. That's one of my big complaints with it, about this movie. Is like, yeah, there's a lot of good stuff about the comic accuracy, but this is, I feel like that this should be a comic accurate kind of thing because
uh,
I think it could fit in the movie.
I,
Instead, you
I
have a scout ship that's like, oh, it's just gonna be a one and done thing where Superman doesn't bother about this at all. Okay, fine, all right, let's move on with our
yeah,
lives. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you have
I,
any hard
I mean,
feelings about this thing here?
whenever you do a reboot like this, you know it's going to be a reinterpretation. You have to change certain things. It's an interesting interpretation. It's not the way I want to see the fortress, but I haven't heard anybody say this. My guess for the reason why they couldn't do it is that in order to create the fortress otherwise, it would have to be some type of terraforming. It would have to be a way that you are changing the landscape of the earth. But the plot of this movie is changing the landscape of the earth and terraforming will kill us. So I don't feel like there's any way. I feel like they basically painted themselves in a corner when they said we need the plot to be about terraforming, destroying the earth. But if we do that, we can't do the Fortress of Solitude because you'd have to terraform that. So they were stuck with what if it was just a spaceship. It's an interesting interpretation, but I'm not burping and coughing and choking at the same time. But yeah, if I think about, I barely register this as the fortress. When I saw it, I'm like, oh, they're doing that because it's supposed to be like the fortress. But because we never really get this as the place he goes, his sanctuary, it never quite feels like the fortress. It's more just like it's a little nod to it.
And I feel like it could have been better, but I mean, it is what it is. Like, it's still, everything else is still like pretty good. I will get to more of 80 Adams actually right now because we actually come to Lois trying to find Clark, and this is the one thing that I actually like about her character is being this obsessive over him. And the fact that she's going out of her way to going out of the other towns and out of the other places to find out who this man is. She's going to this bar. She's going to the fisherman. She's going to the other places, and then she ends up going to the Kent farm, and then going to the gravestone where Jonathan Kent is lying there dead. Which again, I like this interpretation. I like the idea of having her like still being like obsessed over him, but I just don't feel like that Amy Adams is delivering her line to the way that she should be. Like, I feel like that she's just so like robotic. You know what I mean? Just like reading him off.
Oh,
I just feel like she's just reading off a script. There's none of the playfulness that Lois Lane is supposed to have. Which again, I understand this is a little bit of a gritty, like kind of dark movie, but like you could still have a little bit of playfulness. Like again, we
they
had
get
Henry.
there though. They get there in the handcuff scene. I think that's
Well,
where they
yeah,
do the playfulness.
that's one scene. But then everything else is just like, oh, she's just gonna be like a normal person. Like Lois
I,
Lane is supposed to be this obsessive like pervert, like that how
I
like how we are talking about earlier. But
well,
like
I think
she's
she's
not like this.
obsessive. She is definitely obsessive, but she's an
Yes, but
obsessive
she doesn't
reporter.
act obsessive. She doesn't
She's a,
act it. She doesn't like voice it. She's supposed to be nervous. She's supposed to be like, oh, I want to find Superman because I actually like him very much. But this is like
but
this
I
is like a
think
thing. This is like a thing where it's like I have to find him so that I can actually report this and share this information with the world. It's the wrong obsessive note.
I
It's not the obsessiveness that she likes him. It's the obsessiveness that oh, I gotta share this with the world. The world needs to know about this. The world needs to know about this hero. Instead of her just being like, oh, I want to fall in love with him. There is no obsessiveness with that, except when we get to the handcuff scene. But then, even after that, there's still no obsessiveness over him after that. So that's what my feeling is towards this. That's how I'm reading this. But I just feel like that this could have been done a little bit better. I don't know. What do you
I
think?
think that we had Lois Lane as a very aggressive reporter, a very comics-like reporter with Margot Kidder. We
Yeah.
had kind of like a little bit of a bitter but very experienced Lois Lane in Superman Returns with the Kate Bosworth one. And here what we're getting is again, it's real world reporter. And in reality, reporters aren't going to be fast talking. They're not going to be like, I'm here for the truth. They're just going to be like following leads. It's a lot of legwork. It's a lot of Googling things, talking to people on the phone. It's mundane, boring work. And I feel like she's playing this the way a reporter would be. And they're doing this backwards too, because the biggest complaint people always have is like, how would Lois not realize Clark is Superman? Now, I like the way the other versions do it. This is one of the most clever things they did in the movie where they said, of course she would figure it out right away. Because if she were a real reporter, she'd figure this out right away. So we have to do things backwards, which is why we start to get to a little bit more of like the, you know, uh, googly eye stuff, or even just the playfulness, the fun once we get to the later scenes. But here, she's acting 100% as a reporter, and he convinces her to stop reporting, which is where things change from this point on after the conversation with Perry.
Yeah, fair enough, but I would still like a little sense of playfulness, a little bit, because I feel like that's her character throughout the whole comics, and I feel like that you would be doing it an injustice, because then she's just like acting like a normal human being, personally. But let's get back into this. So it gets led to the Kent farm, and then it gets led to the gravestone of Jonathan Kent, and then he actually goes to a backstory where. I don't know, like the caption says he was like a teenager, so I'm guessing this is like around his grade 11, grade 12 year probably. And so
No, I don't think it would have to be early. You're talking about the bus accident, right?
no, we're talking about the car accident. Because I
The
have
car
it.
accident.
No, the tornado scene.
Oh, the tornadoes. Yeah,
Yeah,
tornado seems
it's
you have
like
to be about 17. Yeah.
yeah. So that's why'd you interrupt me there? Wow. Okay.
No, I
thank
thought you were talking because she's
No,
following.
I'm not going backwards.
Well, no, but what you skipped was her meeting Pete Ross, which was the first part.
Oh,
'Cause he's telling the story
yeah.
about
No,
the bus.
of course. Well, like I said, I've led through those. I did
Yeah.
a thing where I led through all the scenes. I just forgot to mention Pete Ross, but she does end up meeting him at an IHOP.
IHOP.
No, it was
He's managing the IHOP.
I don't think we still have one in Winnipeg. I think we do.
I mean, I think we do, but I can't eat there, so I wouldn't know.
Well, yeah, of course, because you're gluten free. Stupid genes. Darn it. So yeah, we come to this point in time where Clark is explaining what happened to his dad with a tornado accident. Again, Kansas, well fitting. Wizard of Oz, a joke again. I actually planned it out that time. So and then we get this flashback where Clark is freaking out at his dad and saying, "I wish that you would do better." And just basically rubbing him off like that, like you're not my real parents. You're not my real parents. Yeah, do better. Yeah,
it's almost like you look at those words every day before you step out the door.
That was the intention of my friend there. But yeah, no, he's basically just being like, "You're not my parents. You can't tell me what to do." And then Jonathan Kent's just like, "Maybe our best is not enough for you," which is actually pretty emotional line when you think about it, because like they're doing their best, but having him just trying to freak out like that, being like, "Oh, you're not my real parents because you just showed me the spaceship and I'm actually an alien." So it's like, yeah, it's kind of a little bit of a sad moment there, just having that being the last line of between Kent and Johnson. And then we get the famous tornado scene where everyone is trying to freak out, where everyone is trying to go run to the bridge. Jonathan Kent actually is the one who stays back and helps people, so he's the one trying to still hide his son because he doesn't want it to be revealed. And then the most heartbreaking thing, after his dad goes out to get back to the dog, releases it, he gets his ankle breaks crushed by a truck here, who flies off because of the tornado. And then as he's walking off, Clark is about to go and be like, "Oh, Dad," and then he's like, and that's all it is. There's no words. There's just that simple hand gesture, and then he just flies off in the tornado, which made me super sad as a kid, and still makes me super sad right now. And I've alluded to before that the death in Superman 1 for Jonathan Kent was a little bit not as impactful. This right here is impactful, because this is telling him to hide. This is telling him that you can't save everybody. And in this case, it's actually a good metaphor because his dad dies because of it. And it's not because of his fault, but it actually motivates him later on to where he does get revealed to do try to save everyone. But the idealistic realizing is that he can't save everybody. But I love this scene more than that Superman one because of the fact of everything being built up to having more scenes with Jonathan Kent and Clark and just having the whole thing there. And actually, speaking of that, I completely forgot to mention, we actually get a little bit of a baby penis in this movie, where
Do we?
yeah, we get when Jor-El is doing the codex thing onto him. So we do get Nirvana baby. So it's not a Superman origin story without a baby penis. So
yeah, that kid's gonna sue one day.
Again. But yeah. So sorry, I forgot to mention that before, and I just came up with it now. But yeah, we come back to the present. Clark explains everything that's going on, and he explains to him why he wants to keep hiding because the world's not ready for him. And again, like you alluded to before, Lois respects that, and so she goes to Perry White. She Perry White grills her for the article because he figures out that the because of the news and everything, he figured out that it's actually released, and she tells her to take it down. And before we get that action, actually, no, wait, is that? No, no, it's like much later. But we're gonna get a little bit more of a little bit of a gotcha scene later with that article there with the guy there. We come back to the farm where Clark is visiting his mom. She gets emotional about it and talks to Clark about the whole situation about him leaving, and now he's coming back. And because of Lois Lane trying to find out who he is, he confronts her and says, "She's a friend. Don't worry. She's just doing her job." And now we come to the military base where General Stomwick, aka the Martian Manhunter, but we don't know that yet because the Snyder Cut didn't release in like a couple years' time.
I'm gonna argue that this is General Swanwick and that the Martian Manhunter we see later is posing as him. That's the way I read this.
Okay, well, we'll save that argument for later. I'm actually going to be we're actually going to stopping again in just a moment here, so just hold on to that thought. And he gets
just cool down, Colin.
Yeah, just cool down. Hey, go run outside again in that stupid atmosphere. Maybe then you'll actually cool off. Oh wait, you'll cough again because of smoke. Oh darn it, I don't. That's really sad.
I'm General Zod. I haven't adjusted to Manitoba's wildfire atmosphere yet.
You've been living here your whole life. How have you not adjusted to the atmosphere, Colin?
Well, I haven't had wildfires for my entire life. There should
have been a fire when you were a kid. Obviously, there should have been. But you're nerd. We come to the news, and now we have the whole scene of General Zod taking over all the technology of the Earth and basically propelling his message that he's coming to Earth. If Kal-El doesn't surrender in the next 24 hours, Earth's gonna get grilled, and they're gonna be toast. So now the news channel is breaking this down with the guy who's published the website and basically outs Lois Lane for being like, oh wait, she's the one that knows this guy. And so now we have her calling Perry White, trying to figure out what's going on. Perry White's trying to figure out what she's doing because he's like, the whole world's at stake because of you. You're the one that released the article, so you gotta tell us what's going on. And so she regrets. She doesn't share the news because she's trying to protect Clark. But then the FBI come to her apartment, and then she gets arrested by them. And here in this next scene now, we have a radio call in a Catholic church. I think it's a Catholic church. It looks like it because of the windows being all picturey. And it's breaking down all the action. And during that, it's a little bit weird that we get a flashback while he's at the Catholic church with radio calling. But then during this flashback scene, Ken is getting bullied again by a bunch of teens pushing him around on the fence. And then his dad comes in again. Basically the kids then scurry off. And he basically tells him to... And then his dad basically tells him that he has to find his character. And again, the theme of, you have these powers. Are you going to use them for good? Or are you going to use them for evil? Again, the whole dark and gritty thing just being built up like, is he going to be a hero or is he going to be a villain? Because we actually do get that explored a little bit more in Batman v Superman, where that's another theme around it, where Batman's just being like, he's a god to these people, but is he actually trustworthy? So we'll get more into that. You'll get more of that when we get to Batman v Superman, which we won't be doing on this channel, not for a very long time. And then we come to Clark trying to break down his feelings, and then he surrenders to the military. Then we get this whole scene of Lois and him doing the whole handcuff thing, where he's just like, if it makes them feel safe, I'll just do it for them. And then we have this whole little thing where we're about to get a name call from Lois being like, is that an S? It's like, no, it's a House of L. It stands for hope. And then she's just like, oh, it's an S here. It could be super, and then doesn't finish it off because they didn't want to save the title card for later, I guess. And then we have this whole little thing with the Doctor and Superman, and I just find it really funny that during this talk, and while they're being like, can we trust you? He's being like, you can't hold me. I'm the Man of Steel. You can't control me at all. I control myself. What makes you think that I won't come out there and blaze you guys off to your deaths? Like, again, awesome scene. Amazing performance by Henry Cavil here, just being like, you guys are screwed. You guys just have to trust me. And so they ended up turning him into General Zod, and the people come to get him, and they actually asked for Lois. I personally don't know why that would be the case, but maybe you can have some explanation for
Well,
later.
because
But
they're clearly monitoring Earth's broadcast, and they would have heard Lois Lane of the Daily Planet know who this guy
okay,
is.
okay, okay. No, that's fair. So they get Lane, and then they come and bring her up to the ship. And this is going to be our second pause before the end of the movie. So, Colin, is there anything that you want to mention about? Maybe a little bit more about
Yeah.
Zod's broadcast, or maybe more about Clark Kent and Lois Lane here.
Yeah, I mean, I love Lois's quick investigation thing here, because she describes it. She's like is kind of like following an urban legend. This person says this happened, this person says this happened. You start connecting the dots, and you're seeing her go from one location to the other. Interviewing the lady who also kind of an interesting thing. We're sort of always led to believe that like Clark Kent, had a girlfriend in Lana Lang when he was in high school, and then nobody until Lois later on. And it's like, but here he's got some bartender that he hooked up with because he clearly was working there for like 2 or 3 days, but she refers to him as honey, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so you get Lois interviewing this lady, and that's probably where she's like, oh man, he was so strong, and oh, have you ever watched him walk shirtless through a fire? Oh, this is where Lois is like, oh, there might be more to this guy here.
He's
But
ruined everybody.
yeah, but like yeah, just her following these leads because like people for years always said, "Oh, she's a smart reporter. How come she can't figure this out?" And again, depending on how you're watching this thing, she wouldn't figure out because nobody would believe Clark Kent is. But if you're doing a more reality based one, this is what would happen. It wouldn't be that hard to connect the dots. Um, Now I have arguments for later on is that clearly he's gone. He doesn't exist anywhere. Like he's been them doing it where he was in high school and then he disappeared and then he came forward. What is there to find on Clark Kent? You do facial recognition. That's when it becomes more of a problem when he works at the Daily Planet, where we see him have too many face to faces where they're clearly recording video in this interrogation room and stuff like that, where it
Yeah,
starts to lose plausibility later on. But a lot of other people should be just as smart as Lois Lane in this movie,
yeah,
because she does this without having any facial recognition or anything like that. The flashback of like the tornado scene. So first, I love him saying, "You're not my dad. You're just a guy who found me in a field." A teenager would probably say something really mean like that. But then
yeah,
it's Kevin Costner's reaction. He goes, "You know what? You're right. I'm not your dad. But he says, "I'm the guy who raised you, and I'm doing the best I can." It was this scene, not the earlier one, where he says, "I'm making this up as I go." Where I started to assess this scene differently because when I first saw, people are very. This is one of the most criticized moments in the movie. Is Oh, why did he just let his dad die? He could have easily saved him without anybody seeing it by super speeding, right? Two arguments against that. One, we have never seen him super speed at this point in the movie. We clearly saw him discover his powers of flight after he was in the fortress, and that was 12 years later, 15 years later, because I think his age in this movie is supposed to be 32 years old, and he was 17 when his dad died. Took him 15 years to figure out how to fly. We never saw him super speed as a teenager. We have no reason to believe he can't do anything other than just lift heavy objects at this point. So, how would he have saved his dad without revealing his powers to anybody? That's my first argument. Second argument is Kevin Costner saying repeatedly in this movie, I don't know whether it's the right call or not. Maybe you should have let those kids die. Maybe maybe I am just making this up as I go, and I'm not, your father, and I don't know everything that there is to know. It's Jonathan who makes the call during this tornado scene. He says to Clark, "No, go take your mother and get her over there. I'll go back for the dog." He does this probably because he's thinking Clark's powers are about to get revealed very quickly here otherwise. Clark is about to make the move and he just holds him back. He holds him back because he knows there's no way he's going to get to me without revealing his powers. Probably because he didn't have super speed, but even if he did, let's say this is the wrong call and that he could have done this without revealing his powers. This is Jonathan being an imperfect father and saying, above everything else, I'm protecting your identity and people from harassing you. Was it the right call? The fact that I spent years kind of believing that opinion of saying this doesn't really make sense is why I'm now focusing on that line and saying that's why this makes sense. Because Jonathan says, literally in this scene, he says, I'm not making all the right calls. I'm making this up as I go. And that actually makes it more heartbreaking because then you have to think he probably didn't have to die. And Clark has to live with this. So whereas before I wasn't like one of these diehard criticizers, I'm just like, it doesn't really make sense. Now I'm like, no, that actually makes perfect sense if you really think about it. I want to add some of the other Daily Planet people on here other than Perry White. Steve Lombard. So I don't know, you haven't recognized the other names, but Steve Lombard is the sports guy here who's
yeah.
constantly loosely hitting on Lois Lane throughout the course of this movie.
Trying to, but failing.
Another character, I would call him an antagonist to Clark Kent and not an antagonist to Superman.
Mm-hmm.
He's just a guy who works at the Daily Planet. He's the sports reporter for the Daily Planet and all the comics and everything. And he's the guy who's usually doing this. He's usually not necessarily fighting for Lois's attention, but he's the one to hit on Lois, and maybe it makes Clark a little bit jealous every once in a while. And they kind of play this. But this actor, Michael Kelly, was actually a pretty big deal at the time this movie came out. Because if you ever heard the TV show House of Cards, that was like the show that made Netflix with Kevin Spacey. He was one of the biggest stars on House of Cards, and that show lasted like 6 years. And that show was enormous. And then after that, he then went on to do the Jack Ryan TV series, which now they're doing a movie with Jack Ryan. So he's one of these guys that most people are like, oh, I think I recognize him from something. Maybe it was House of Cards. It's not like he's going to lead his own movies, but when this movie came out, there were probably a lot of people in the theater going, it's that guy from House of Cards, you know? And clearly they intended for this to be a bigger role that we never quite got paid off. And then the other one, not a character from the comics, but Jenny, the girl who's just at the Daily Planet. I kind of weirdly enjoy her character in a comical way because I'm like, they make such a big deal about her later on, like she can't die, and like we barely know she exists. I forgot her name was Jenny, to be honest. But it's one of these characters where it's almost become a joke. I think when on my other podcast, when we covered this movie, Jenny sort of became the butt of our jokes after all. Not Jenny! Please don't let Jenny die! So now whenever I watch this movie, I'm always zeroed in on Jenny. I'm like, oh, look, it's Jenny. It's one of these things where like, it started as a character that you make fun of, and now you're like, I kind of weirdly love that character I made fun of here. But we get like this whole atmosphere with the Daily Planet. They have their own things and everything. The flashback with the bullies picking on Clark, whether he's gripping the fence and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Again, great scene with Jonathan there. It's just the fact that like Kevin Costner, the kids just look up and they see Kevin Costner staring at them. And it's more just like, uh-oh. Like, I like that, like, this Jonathan Kent is not just the nice old man. This Jonathan Kent's the one that the teenagers in town look at. They're like, don't get on his bad side. And that would be Kevin Costner, right? You don't want to see Kevin Costner giving you that glare.
Yeah.
But the little nod in this, I actually did look it up. It's not just that they gave the name the Fordman boy. This character who's picking on Clark is named officially Whitney Fordman, which is the character from Smallville that was created for that show. So they actually gave this bully the exact same name as the Smallville one, but there's actually another background thing that's a connection to Smallville in the scene, and that's Jonathan is at like some type of garage, and it says Sullivan's Garage on there. I said there were two original characters created for Smallville. The other one was a character named Chloe Sullivan, who was like Clark's best friend, basically became the replacement for Pete Ross when Pete Ross left that show. So they put not only Whitney in this, but they put the other original character, Sullivan, as the garage here. So
nice.
As a Smallville fan, it made me very happy seeing that they gave a lot of different little subtle nods to Smallville here. The pre-scene, okay, so first of all, the Zod appearance. That's incredible. This is like, it gives me chills watching this to this day when you just have first Clark seeing this in the sky, and you get again that it almost looks like whenever Clark uses his like, I wouldn't call it X-ray vision, his like zoom and binocular vision, right? It has like this jerky quality to it. And he sees the ship, and then all of a sudden you get that weird noise and the test pattern, like bee, and then the weird static on the screen, you know, it appearing in all the different languages, the "You are not alone" speech from Zod. Mm. This was used as like a way to promote the movie. It was used as a teaser trailer not long before the movie came out, where it was just a teaser trailer of this Zod recorded message. And like when I watch this in the movie, the way that it's filmed, it really does give you chills seeing it around the world and everything. And then like the way that everything just goes black after that and the light bulb pops, it's like coming out of a horror movie. But my biggest complaint when this movie came out was that I wanted more of this. I wanted more of how the world reacted to having an alien, because I feel like that is the point of this movie. And in some ways it gets a little bit lost in this, but this is where Batman v Superman deserves a lot more credit, because that one totally takes the ball and runs with it on the whole idea about how is the world going to react to a real alien. This movie starts getting it, you know, and then Batman v Superman really takes off with it. But the one thing we get on the TV here about the tabloid reporter Lois sold her story to, who sells her out. This is also very much like The Dark Knight. If you remember the scene in The Dark Knight where there's the guy who, again, like Lois Lane, it would be pretty easy in reality for somebody to figure out Bruce Wayne is Batman. And in The Dark Knight, somebody very easily figures out Bruce Wayne's Batman, and they basically threaten him. But then he goes on TV and says, I'm going to reveal who this is because, you know, people are going to die otherwise. That's what this guy does. So this is kind of a fun idea lifted from The Dark Knight. But it's the one moment in this movie where I'm like, wish we had a little bit more of this. Where we got like how the world's responding, because that's what the basis of this is.
Hmm.
His scene with the priest, though, is probably the subtly funny moment in the movie where the priest's like, "Tell me what's troubling you, my son." And he goes, "Well, that General Zod guy, I'm the one they're looking for." And the guy, there's no expression on his face that changes, but you just see his throat. He has the biggest gulp, like, like, okay.
I never noticed that. Oh
Go
boy.
back and watch it. It is so funny the way he gulps, but then he goes right to, "Well, let me tell you something, son. Like, I'm trying not to freak out here, but it's so good." Um, the surrender,
But still an emotional scene though, because it's just like,
yeah,
what's your gut telling you to do? And it's
because
just basically just being like, oh, I think Zod's
I
gonna
can't trust Zod.
I
Yeah,
can't trust him. And then that's the whole theme of the second half, is that who is he gonna trust? Is he
yeah.
gonna trust Zod, or is he gonna trust the humans? Like, that's the whole second half of this movie being built around the theme of trust.
Yeah, and there's a brilliant moment that I never quite picked up on until I just watched it, 2 hours ago before we started recording. That perfectly bookends that we'll get to later on. But yeah, he goes to surrenders to the humans, and I love that, like, he does surrender. The first images released from this movie was the vault scene, which we'll get to in a little bit, but the second one was this scene of him in the handcuffs.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing that and being like, "Why is he in handcuffs?" But this movie perfectly explains it, where he's saying Lois, like, "Well, it wouldn't be much of a surrender if I didn't. And if the handcuffs make them feel better, then that's what I'm here for. I'm here so that they trust me." Like you said, this whole thing about trust, that they even have that line later on. It's just as much about, will the humans trust him? And he's doing this so they do trust him. But at the same time, he's still flaunting his powers a little. This is a little bit of that superdickery.com stuff that I talked about on the first Superman movie we did, where he has a bit of an attitude, which it looks like we're getting a little bit of that in the James Gunn Superman as well, where you get Swanwick from the other side, who's like, "Oh, I'm General. Yeah, Swanwick, I know." And you don't see that it's a two-way mirror. He just says, "I can see your name above your badge." And then they cut to the reverse angle where it's like, it's a two-way mirror. And then everybody is like, "Oh, okay." But little nods here. So first of all, Swanwick, I'll just mention my theory here. Nothing in this, when you go back and watch this movie after watching Justice League, there is nothing to make you believe that this guy is not anything other than just of Earth. Because he's the guy who trusts Superman the least, even though the Martian Manhunter is a guy who hides on Earth in the form of, an identity of some person of power.
Yeah.
And is there sort of as a protector of Clark in different versions. This just, to me, 100% says this is a real human. And my theory is that because in Justice League, we see him take the shape of a couple of different characters, I think that at some point, General Swanwick dies and he says, "I can assume this identity and I can keep my ear to the ground." But the same actor, Harry Lennox, the fact that they had the idea to bring him back, I love that. And also the other guy who plays the Colonel here, Colonel Hardy, the guy who actually leads them into battle. That actor, Christopher Maloney, he's really big in the law. He's on one of those Law and Order shows. He's like a huge star on television. But his character has a small tie to other comics because they give his code name in this as Guardian. And if you know, Guardian is a character in the Superman universe as well.
Yeah.
So whether or not they ever intended to make him Guardian, I doubt, but it's cool. But this confession scene, or not confession scene, that was the priest one, the interrogation scene, this is where I think we get that playfulness with Lois. Like, even her asking about, the handcuffs really necessary, And then the best part where she's like, "What does the S stand for?" He goes, "It's not an S," because he's very serious and sophisticated. "On my planet, this is a symbol for hope." And she just looks at him and goes, "Well, here it's an S." And then he goes, "I think maybe it stands for," and then you get the super, then she almost says Superman, which makes me question later on when you get the other army officers who show up and they're like, "Superman." They're like, "What?" It's like, "Oh, that's what we're calling him."
Calling him Superman.
Did Lois leave the scene and say, "I think the S stands for Superman"? Because at no point does she ever say that, but yet everybody starts calling him that. So did they come to the same conclusion? Or is there some great deleted scene where she's like, "Hey, check out the S. I say it should be Superman." And they're like, "That's awesome." I and then he's in the background not even hearing this.
I want to see that deleted scene. That deleted scene might make me a little bit more interested in Amy Adams' Lois Lane. But
if they had done that, it would perfectly made this. But sadly, there's no deleted scene for that. But yeah, I mean, I guess we'll talk about the general Zod stuff and the battle stuff after this, and I can take another sip of water. I did better on that one. I think.
You instead of doing it under 19 minutes, you did it in under 18 minutes and 59 seconds. So good job, Colin. We take progress over anything. Progress. Let's go. All right. This is the last little bit. I got 3 small paragraphs to finish up, so let's get this going. They arrive at the command ship and they meet General Zod. He is having Superman is having a hard time adjusting to the ship's atmosphere, as Colin made the joke of earlier. But now we are sent to like a kind of like a dream realm. I'm not entirely
Yeah.
sure what this is, but I'm not sure if this appeared in the comics of any kind. But
Yeah.
we get this little dream zone here where Zod is in a it's in a classic black Superman suit that he wears in the comics before, and he breaks down what happened. So he confirms that they got stuck in the Phantom Zone, which weirdly wasn't like specified when the court of elders were
Yeah.
where they were bashing him to there. Like, why couldn't you just say the Phantom Zone? Like,
And
if it's like literally the Phantom Zone, like, why can't you just like say it? Like, you're just
yeah, like
bashing him there anyway.
we
Like,
see them put them on some type of structure in space that then gets like swallowed into a dimension, which would lead you to believe the Phantom Zone. But yeah, to me, this is like my equivalent. The way you complain about the Fortress, this to me is like, did it need to be the Phantom Zone? This feels like you knew you had to do something different, so you're changing it, but you also just could have left it out.
hmm. And then we also get a little bit of a callback to the original second Superman movie, where an explosion actually frees him from the Phantom Zone, because we get the bomb releasing General Zod from Superman 2, and this one it's the actual planet Krypton exploding that
Yeah.
releases him from the Phantom Zone. So it's a little bit of a callback from second Superman movie. So good on you for that. And then he also breaks down the fact that they tried to go to the other post to try and see if they could find anybody, and they found nothing, so they salvage it. And then he reveals his big plan to Kal-El, that he's going to change Earth to the new Krypton. And now this is where Superman's, again, bringing out the feelings of like, oh, what about the humans? And he's like, no, we want new Krypton, and they're going to die. So he is very, very bloodthirsty, and I love it. I love the character for his character for that. And now they are prepping for the transformation. Clark is in the strapped on because he doesn't have any powers anymore, and they're sucking blood out of him. Just take a little sample of it. And Lois is being transported carrying a Kodak stick. She puts it into the same hole that Kal-El did originally, and then we get the Jor-El back to the ship, and he explains that they can send them to the Phantom Zone again with these simple steps that we'll get to later on. And now, because Jor-El fixed the ship to be able to adjust to the human livability and the human atmosphere, Superman is now getting his powers back. Lois can take off the helmet now because she can actually adjust to it. And then both of them are escaping. She escapes from a pod, which is now damaged thanks to the girl soldier. I don't remember what her name was, but I know she was a callback from. Yeah, I remember she was a callback from the second movie. So
she's yeah, it's a different name of a character in this one.
Oh,
because
is it? Okay.
I think they developed Zod's character so much more since Superman 2 came out. Feora is actually, I don't think they identify her in this movie, but in the comics, Feora is Zod's wife.
Okay, so kudos to him finding a wife, I guess. I don't know. And then we get
He's had 32 years trapped in a Phantom Zone. Actually, he probably had about 32 minutes trapped in a Phantom Zone, and then the rest of the time floating through space.
yeah, literally. So yeah, congratulations on 32 years of marriage, Zod. Congratulations. So yeah, now we get Clark rescuing Lois. She abandons her again. Like, what is this? Him abandoning her in a random field. He abandoned her in a middle of the Arctic. So he's just abandoning his chances to fall in love. So good job, Superman. You're learning the human ways very, very hard. And then
Does you think that line? I always love the line from the first Spider-Man movie where Norman storms out on Thanksgiving dinner and he's trying to give his advice to Harry. He goes, let me give you some words for the wise about your girlfriend. Do what you need to with her, and then broom her fast.
Forgot about that. I forgot for some reason. I forgot that Willem Dafoe was a menace.
Did you hear that those were coming back to theaters? I know part 2 for
yes,
sure, but
I did. I actually heard about that. I heard about it wasn't the first Spider-Man. It's the second Spider-Man 2. And then apparently there's like a 2.12 or something like that. Apparently,
yeah, they released that 2.5 or whatever it was before.
Apparently, there's like some deleted scenes that they're going to be doing, and apparently it's going to be like a 4K kind of thing coming out in August, which I am definitely going to be checking out. I actually want to check that out very, very, very badly. So we can talk about that later. But so Clark again, bans her in a random field. Good job. You're missing out your chances to get a girl. Good, perfect. And then Zod comes to the Kent farm to try to search for the Codex. The Codex isn't there. Then Clark comes to rescue his mother. He damages his Zod's tech, and now he's adjusting to the Earth's atmosphere very harshly, which isn't good for Superman because later on we're gonna have a bit of a big battle at the end, which is Superman versus Superman, and it's gonna be again with the realistic tone and the realistic darkness of the movie. It's obviously not gonna go well. So, whoopee for that. And then they pick him up, and some of the soldiers come back to fight Clark. I'm guessing that this is the small town. I don't know if it's a Smallville.
It is Smallville because we get to IHOP there. Yeah.
Okay, so it is Smallville. Okay, so they fight in Smallville. He mostly fights the lady at a IHOP, and then they come back into town, and then they stop him. And the military was virtually firing at Superman and all the Zod's military people, and so they actually decide to then stop, which again is building off the trust thing, like, oh, we're actually going to trust this guy now. And so they join forces with him. Then Clark comes to check on his mother to see if she's all right. Lois then, for some reason, finds a taxi in the middle of nowhere. I don't know how you're going to find a taxi in the middle of the field.
It's a cop car.
Oh, it's a cop car. Never mind. Okay, so what's so happens?
Which really makes you wonder why this cop isn't like, that guy, the alien who's beating the other aliens? I took him to the Kent farm. He might be Clark.
Everyone's figuring out that's Clark. There's no reason for a secret identity in this superhero universe, the DCEU, which, by the way, what a stupid name. DCEU.
Why is it stupid?
Can't you just call it the DCU? You freaking...
Do you want to know why? Do you know what? I actually like DCU better because everybody lives and breathes thinking that anything related to Marvel and DC now are the movies first and the comics second. I'm like, no, comics are always first. So to me, it shouldn't be the MCU for the movies. It should be the MCEU for the movies. And the MCU to me is the comics. So I'm 100% behind DCEU is better.
You are unbelievable, and I don't. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. We're getting separated off a stupid comment of a name of a universe. Which doesn't go to show. Which goes to show how chaotic our family is. But Now Lois, again, she gets brought by the cop car. She then reveals the plan to help Superman and everyone else get the people from Zod's army to the Phantom Zone. And there is two ships that actually get to separate in space. There's one in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and then there's one in Metropolis, which isn't the Statue of Liberty, so Colin doesn't have to worry about the Statue of Liberty winking at this time. So you don't have to worry about that at all. And then Superman starts wreaking mayhem inside the Pacific Ocean, and the military starts to go and attack the whatever the Metropolis is called, and then they end up firing missiles, and the gravitational pull is actually flowing up towards a ship, towards the people. So it's hitting the streets, it's hitting buildings, it's getting chaotic, and this is the realistic Superman, the realistic superhero movie that I actually like, that because just how much damage that's happening, and so. Now they start making mayhem. Superman ends up going to delete that building in the Pacific Ocean, and the military goes their own way. During this fight, Zod speaks with the hologram of Jor-El, and all the while, Superman stops the machine, and the military ends up stopping the machine in Metropolis, and they suck everybody back up to the Phantom Zone, except for Zod. And so, after the brutal fight, he wins. He goes out to Lois. While Lois tries to comfort him, he has a discussion with the general and the captain who has been thinking about... And with the general and the cap... Oh, no, this is going to be the end. So, sorry. I went a little ahead of myself. So, they stop the machines. Zod goes crazy. He ends up getting the powers of Superman because he adjusts to the Earth's atmosphere. And then... Superman they end up fighting for 10, 15 minutes or something like that, which is crazy. Everything is going mayhem. And then the whole Zod then just goes out to Superman, and then he got him in a headlock. Zod is shooting us his laser beams to try and kill certain civilians. And then Superman had to make the tough decision, which is then to snap his neck. And then obviously my beginning quote, which he used just screaming like a little girl. So now at the end,
pretty masculine scream, I thought. As far as screaming and crying goes, I think that was about as masculine as it gets.
Is it a scream?
I'm talking about Henry Cavill's, not yours. Yours definitely sounded like a little girl. Yeah.
Oh my goodness! Of course, people. This is how chaotic our family is. So then,
by the way, who's watching your family's dog right now?
They're leaving on Tuesday actually. So
they didn't leave already.
They're still home. No, they're not. I'm in my room. I'm not
Well,
at my
no,
parents' place right now. So
no,
wow.
I know that, but I thought they had left already. But so you
No,
will be
no,
watching
no.
the
They got
Family
no, no,
Dog?
no. They started vacation on Friday, but then they have
Ah, okay.
vacation for a
But
week.
you
So
will be dog sitting.
I will be dog sitting. So if we want to
Okay,
record,
good.
if we want to record, what do you mean? Okay, good. Are you sick of seeing this side of do better?
No,
Are
I
you
just wanted
sick
to
of
make
it?
sure because your mom wanted me to dog sit, and I'm like, I don't think there's any way we could trust our kids with only one parent at home because they're escaping with their.
Well, good thing they have good. Well, good thing they have a son who is not
Yes,
doing anything and except for podcasting and boring. So
you do have
good.
a job. I was going to tell
I
people
mean, I do,
that.
but it's still boring. I have a boring life. So anyways, we're almost done. So we get after this brutal fight. Zod, Superman ends up bringing the a machine, a $12 million machine to the
Drone.
general, just being like, you can't just spy on me, general. And
Yeah.
so after this whole debacle, he says, you just have to trust me. And so he flies off. The girl captain is it's just staring at him with
She's
googly
Amy
eyes.
Adams him.
Yeah, and so he's aiming at him, and then he's like, "What's wrong, Captain?" He's like, "I don't know. I just think he's kind of hot." So he's like, back to the to
That's
the
where
big
your
boy."
Auntie
Like,
Jamie
yes,
yelled
sir.
out in a big theater, "Amen, sister!"
Did she actually?
No, but I'm sure she's done that at home.
Yeah, oh, done that at home and maybe in her head. And then so she that we then come back to Clark and his mother debriefing about what his dad believed in him and having all that transpire with some flashbacks with him as a kid just being
Oh yeah,
all Superman like, which I
with the
actually
cape.
found out was being pretty cool. And then we get to explain that he's going to go to the Daily Planet, where he gets introduced to everyone, and Lois right now sees through his glasses because he's not even really doing much for his hair. It's basically the same. It's just him just putting on the glasses.
Yeah.
So there's not really a lot of disguise there. And while the epic music of Hans Zimmer
Dun
plays, and I
dun
literally
dun
stayed
dun
through
dun
the whole
dun.
credits because
Yeah.
of that scene. Again, I love that theme. It's maybe a little bit better than John Williams just because of my recency bias. But that's the movie. We got this done in like an hour and a half, but I am happy. Again, some stuff with Amy Adams, I'm not happy with. There's a couple little tiny little things in here, like the Phantom Zone and the Fortress of Solitude kind of knockoffs that I wasn't happy with. But overall, this movie is brilliant. Zack Snyder was the perfect man for the job to begin with because his movies were shot beautifully and this fit
Mhm.
everything. So I don't know, Colin, if you want to go through the last little bit before we go to
Uh,
IMDb and all that stuff.
yeah, this will kind of go over your head. I guarantee it'll go over your head. But one of the most famous, respected directors of all time is a guy named Terrence Malick, and Zack Snyder is not in any way like Terrence Malick, but he brings a Terrence Malick look to this movie. And
Yeah,
anybody who's seen a Terrence Malick movie will probably connect the dots when I say that. But it's Zack Snyder going against his own style and his own formula and his own type here and making this movie that makes me appreciate it because everybody involved, from Christopher Nolan to Zack Snyder to Hans Zimmer, they're bringing what they normally bring, but they're saying, but we need to make sure we tailor this to be Superman. So it's the care they took into making it their own individual thing, but making sure it was still Superman that I love so much. A couple little tidbits here. First of all, Zod's battle armor that he sees.
yeah.
Would you believe it if I told you that none of that was real and was all generated in a computer? Literally,
What?
his costume.
No
You
way!
look at all the behind the
That looks
scenes.
so real.
The only costumes the Kryptonians wear that are real are the actual spandex suits, right?
Yeah,
Which in this universe, they explain the behind the scenes footage. The idea is these are flight suits, right?
yeah.
Which is why you see them on the scout ship that's in the Arctic. But the actual armor and everything they have, there's elements that were done as practical costumes, but the battle armor specifically for Zod and for the one Russell Crowe has, they wore motion capture suits. So they were on set and literally wearing a unitard with dots on it. And everything you see with this armor was completely done to computer, which is some of the most unbelievable visual effects I've seen. The best visual effects are ones you don't realize are visual effects. Great visual effects aren't visual effects that are giant explosions or things like that. It's like this little detail that looks completely real. That's like with the Star Wars prequels. People are shocked to discover that they never built a clone trooper costume, that every clone trooper was completely computer generated. Even the
Yeah,
ones where you see with the helmet off, where you see, like, I think it's Commander Cody who has his helmet off in
yeah.
Revenge of the Sith. It was a guy wearing unitard, and then they just animated the suit over him. So yeah, it was crazy when I saw it the first time. Like, I never would have guessed that that was computer generated armor he's wearing. Um, A couple cool things here. One, the dream sequence they have. I love the little detail that Clark is wearing a Kansas City Royals t-shirt, because you always have like the fictional teams, because DC exists in a universe where it's all fictional cities for the most part, right?
Yeah,
Metropolis. So you'll have the Metropolis Sharks or whatever, right? The Gotham City Knights, things like that. For these fictional sports teams. They
yeah.
have him in Kansas, and the fact that he's wearing a real Major League Baseball team shirt, I'm just like, oh, that actually makes sense. He's from Kansas. I don't know. I just get a chuckle out of that. I love the stuff with Jor-El on the ship, the hologram Jor-El. For
Yeah,
one thing, because he acts like a computer in that scene.
yeah,
So it's and I'm not knocking the scene he had, because it's still restrained, the scene he had where it's like, oh, you have no idea how great it is to see you grown and stuff like that. But that's like a regular person. And you have to remember, this is a computer program. So when
yeah,
Jor-El is like, I built this ship and I'm interfaced with it, I could do whatever I want. And then you see him literally saying like, turn left, hit that control panel. And then the way he does these gestures, which are almost very like fast, commanding, robotic, it's like, arm in the air, make a fist, turn your fist. Like it's like he's got this shorthand motion code to control the ship is just
yeah.
so cool. Also, just talking, I missed it earlier, but the fight scene with Russell Crowe and Michael Shannon, they talk about the behind the scenes about training them for the fight scene this movie, because Michael Shannon had never done any fight scenes in his entire career when he made this. Uh,
Mm,
Russell Crowe had done tons. What they actually did was they decided to train them in a very similar style, because they figured on Krypton everybody would be the same, but to bring their own styles to it. So for General Zod, it was very much more like special forces. Every move is meant to kill you, because he's the general. Whereas with Russell Crowe, they actually just figured he's a scientist, so they actually based it on both Gladiator and Cinderella Man, with the boxing movie he made. So I never noticed that until I watched that behind the scenes feature, where if you watch the Zod and Jor-El fight scene, you see a lot of like boxing moves from Jor-El. He's doing like uppercuts, and jabs and hooks and stuff like that.
mm,
And that's simply because he had done so much boxing in Cinderella Man, a couple of years before this.
mm.
Yeah, the robotic Jor-El is fantastic on the ship. I love the escape scene, and again, a good moment of tension too, when Amy Adams is getting in the pod, and he's like, "I'm going to teach you how you can, bring them down here," and then all of a sudden he's just like, "Move your head to the left." She goes, "What?" And then the fist comes and she misses, but then you see that gaping hole in the back of it, but they barely let you dwell on that. And then you just have Jor-El saying, "Hit that control panel," and the whole ship explodes. And because he's a robot, he's not saying, "Quick, you got to get her." He goes, "You might be able to save her." Like it's he's not thinking this is an urgent situation, but the way that like Superman flies in and saves her, and then you get that incredible shot where he's got her in his arms and they're floating down to the ground in the middle of the field. That's one of those like iconic shots you're always looking for in these Superman movies, which along with that, the fight scene that they have in Smallville, that vault scene I was talking about, that was the first image that was released. I mean, this is it's still being done now, where you'll get like before trailers even released, here's one promo shot like a year beforehand. We had that with the Odyssey recently. They had the one of Matt Damon in the Odysseus
Oh
costume.
yeah.
But that was the image they released. This was Henry Cavill kind of like crouching in front of this vault that's caved in. And so I always remember that shot. And it is one of the best shots in the entire movie. But I'm gonna say that shot of like him floating Lois down after they escape from the ship is right up there. And also just like bring some real world things in there about how the changes in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
How do you have these people on different levels? Well,
Hmm.
let's have it where Clark actually has an advantage over Zod up until a certain point, but also let's keep Clark and Zod separate for most of this movie. I never quite realized how important it was that he's fighting Feora here and not Zod, because otherwise you blow the Zod battle. Nowadays we have it where the hero and the villain will fight each other twice, because you have to have one scene where the hero is beaten by the villain and then one where he beats him. But now you've made that predictable. We don't even see Superman and Zod really go at it. We see Superman, and the Superman's Feora fight's probably longer than the one he has with Zod.
Yeah.
Um, the one really great part here, so during the whole Smallville sequence, is where you start to see the adjustment where the helmets start glitching for Feora and everything, and we see that with
Yeah.
Zod as well, and he's like, "I'm out of here, guys," just that visual of like where you could see their eyes blurring and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It ties in perfectly later on. And then I said back with like the first Superman, I love the corny moments in Superman. I think Superman needs to have some corniness to it. We get that here, where the whole battle's over and Superman just sort of stands up, and you got Colonel Hardy and all the people surrounding him, goes, gentlemen, this man is not our enemy. Like that's one of those really cheesy moments where I'm like, yes, I needed that. You have fulfilled something in me that I needed. But it's so good. And this is where they start to refer to him as Superman, and he even says Superman. It's like, oh, it's what we're calling him. But again, like Lois never got up. That's why she definitely had the. I think we should call him Superman. Sweet fist bump. I'll bring it up to the Colonel. I bet he'll love it. Um,
I'll even make a call to the president. He might even love it. He might even rename it to Superman
you
and
work
make a
for the
statue of it in Metropolis and Gotham.
you work for the Daily Planet. We can make this a thing worldwide.
We're the
Uh,
first news station to break this news. We should have rights. We should have all the money and merchandising rights for every merchandise, everything.
yeah, it's so funny how that came about in this movie. Um, so I love the moment here where he's about to take off again right after Lois comes to him and says, you know, uh, this is how we could stop him. Oh, by the way, I did miss the one moment we see Zod and Clark fighting earlier on is where Clark tackles him in the air right after he's going after Martha. And it's a very brief moment right before Zod glitches and bails. But he's just pounding on him saying, did you really think you could threaten my mother? That's an aggressive side of Superman that most people don't think exists. But like you read the comics, Superman can get very angry and aggressive at times. And that's one of the things that he has to hold himself back. And that's one of the things that makes the character so unique is that he is so all powerful. I always talk about people criticize him being all powerful. It's like, no, there's so much more complexity to that than you realize. But that's the only moment we really see him lose it in this movie. But yeah, when he's about to lift off right after Lois comes from the farm and reveals to the cop who drove her, it's Clark Kent all along. Go tell the media, but make sure you call him Superman. uh, but he says you might want to take a step back. So Lois steps back and he goes, maybe another step back, and she kind of smiles. That's that playfulness, you know. We're getting it, but it's going opposite. We're doing this backwards from the way Superman normally is done, you know. So yeah, the whole world engine thing. It's the Indian Ocean, actually. Not
Oh, it
the,
was okay. I thought it was
yeah,
Pacific. Sorry, my bad.
because I was thinking about it. I'm like, oh, these are literally supposed to be on polar opposites of each other, I guess, and that's how they're changing it. I still think they've probably caused a million tidal waves. They wiped out like half of the Caribbean right now. They've wiped out definitely most of Indo.
Caribbean for all those stupid people that pronounce it Caribbean.
Yeah, well, definitely all the Indo region is completely wiped out right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of destruction going on. It's a cool idea, and we do get some of that city destruction that became too common, but I feel like they contain it very well. We see buildings destroyed, but you see the consequence of them. Like there's the one shot where the building is collapsing, right where Perry's trying to get Jenny out. Not Jenny! Oh, how will we live without Jenny as a character in this franchise? But right before that building's collapsing, it looks very realistic because you see the building collapse, but then you see that it's slowing down because it's actually scraping against the other building. So it's the realism to even the visual effects that make it like it's kind of disturbing to watch a lot of the destruction in this movie because you get some. And I'm always a big fan of when there's big destruction stuff like this, you need it to be ground level. And the reason that I think the first Godzilla and Kong movie kind of fails is that you have the biggest battle ever of these two titans and nobody is on the ground watching it. If you can see a person in the middle of this chaos, then you win. And this is why we revisit this in the. Oh, now I'm burping, hiccuping at the same time. I'm just every bodily function that can come out of my mouth is coming out right now.
That's very stinky.
The ones that can come out of the mouth. That is not that everyone's going. But they revisit this in the next movie, and that's because I think they did get some criticism, like all movies were getting criticized at this point for big city destructions. They're like, you know, audiences kind of had it of like I think it kind of hit its peak with the Avengers. You know, the first Avengers movie where people like, you destroyed half of New York City and we see no consequence for it. Like every movie nowadays is just the whole city gets destroyed. So the fact they followed up on this, I think they actually did quite well in this one, but then they follow up on it in Batman v Superman with the opening sequence is great. Yeah, there's a great moment here where you see him destroying the world engine, but he's on the ground and everything, and he reaches out for the sun right after it. Just again, that Superman Returns thing about the sun giving him power. It's just this really well scored moment too from Hans Zimmer. There's a moment here where the planes are lifting off. So right when they're about to release the ship or whatever with the key, and the back of the ship gets hit, and you get this one soldier who gets whipped out. Do you know what the Willem scream is? Have you heard of that?
Oh, of course I hear. Who
Yeah.
hasn't?
Yeah. So if you notice, the Willem scream is inserted right there when the first ship first gets hit when Hamilton's trying to get the key going, and then
Yeah.
that one soldier falls out trying to tell Lois to get back. You're gonna go, ah! It's the Willem scream, and I never noticed that was the Willem scream there.
Hmm.
But yeah, I actually think this is probably some of the best suspense in the movie. The whole thing with the key, like why isn't it working? Because nobody in the audience is gonna make sense of this. And the way you have Emil Hamilton kind of tilt his head, he's like, "Wait a second, let me just try this," and he tilts the ship. Boom, it works. I also like the little play that they have between Colonel Hardy and Feora throughout the course of this when she's about to kill him in the Smallville sequence, and she says, "Oh, a good death is its own reward." But then he doesn't die because again, small character, but he even had that moment where she was saying, General Zod, should I go tell General Zod that you refuse to turn over the prisoner? He says, I don't care what you tell him. This Colonel Hardy guy's got a small role, but very fun in the movie. And then right
Yeah.
before she dies, he says the same thing: "A good death is his own reward." It's kind of an unsung moment in this movie.
Hmm.
And then the moment that they have the kissing scene between Lois and Clark at the end of this, and she has that line, which if you ever saw the movie Speed, I think this is kind of like a callback to Speed. So the Keanu Reeves movie Speed, there's a moment
Yeah.
where she says, I've heard that relationships that start under extreme circumstances never work out. This one is something that's similar to that, but then he says, I think that only counts if you're kissing a human, which again, you get some of that playfulness in here. But I've always had the opinion, we're not doing the other two movies, but when I finally saw Justice League, I realized Man of Steel and Batman v Superman were the prequel stories to Superman. He becomes Superman at the end of Justice League. Up until then, you're building to it. And I feel like everything they're doing with Lois here, I get where you're coming from, but it is building to what Lois is supposed to be, which I think we get by the end of Justice League. But I still like some of their moments they have here. The woman I talked about earlier on, but the thing about who are you going to trust when Zod is breaking down after everybody's been sucked into the Phantom Zone. He's talking about, I was bred for one purpose, the protection of Krypton, and now all my people are dead. They cut to Henry Cavill, and he has a look on his face. It's not like regret, but it's like a little bit of sympathy, just a little bit of sympathy, and because there's no line of dialogue there, but he goes from all my people are gone, and Henry Cavill looks like, I know, I'm sorry, to the next second he says, and I'm going to tear down this world. And then that's when he says, you're a monster, Zod. So very subtle acting from Henry Cavill. We get this one moment of maybe this guy could be redeemed to, no, I'm probably going to have to kill you. The most controversial thing in this movie is the death of Zod, but just two little things you probably missed when you watch this before that. During the fight scene with all this destruction going on and everything, we see an oil tanker. There's like a truck hauling a couple tanks that gets
Oh
knocked
yeah.
over. Yeah, and it says LexCorp on it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and then the next sequence, they go up into space and they crash into a satellite. And if you look at the satellite, it has the Wayne Enterprises logo on it. So they were planting seeds for both Lex Luthor and Bruce Wayne here. And I remember seeing that in the theater specifically. Haha! And you hear a couple people in the back of the theater when they get up to the satellite, like, Wayne Enterprises!
Yeah.
People kind of recognize that. I think this fight scene's incredible. And this is controversial, the whole killing Zod thing, because that is something he doesn't kill, right? A couple things people need to understand. For one thing, the whole not killing thing, a lot of that was because of the comics code, if you heard of that, which is
Mhm.
there was no rating system for comics. And then there were a lot of, I guess, groups out there who started getting upset about the negative impact comics could have on kids, particularly with violence and stuff like that, that they
Mhm.
created something called the comics code, which is similar to like movie ratings code, which also was created for a similar purpose. Because once upon a time in the 1930s, a kid could walk into a movie that should be R-rated. But even putting that aside, I like the idea of Superman has a no killing policy. But when this came out, this made sense to me. They position this perfectly as there is no other option. Because even Zod says, either I die or you die, and he wants to make sure that it's that, which is why he's going to kill these people. And then it's the regret you have from Superman. But I feel like they set this up perfectly where this isn't like the tornado sequence where people are like, well, there was another way out of that. I feel like, no, this is he had to kill him, and it's that you see the regret. But what I specifically remember was when this movie came out, there was a lot of outrage for people who actually said, I like the movie, but I cannot accept this Superman kills Zod at the end. Superman would never do that. And then I remember specifically replying to I am not one to get into arguments on the internet, but replying to multiple threads online of people complaining about this, saying, so do you remember the end of Superman 2 where Zod loses his power and Superman kills him by throwing him into a bottomless chasm? And you usually not get a response from people like that because people are like, no, Superman does not kill. This movie is wrong. And you're like, what about Superman 2? Everybody loves that movie. He kills Zod in Superman 2. Now, there's actually a deleted scene in the end of Superman 2 where you see Zod lived, which doesn't make any sense, which is probably why they cut it. But I remember one person specifically who was like, oh, no other Superman has ever had him killed before. I cannot accept this. I replied and said, he kills Zod at the end of Superman 2, like I was replying to everybody. And this one guy replied saying, I haven't seen that movie. Sounds like I wouldn't like it. And I'm like, good for you, man. But it's so
Don't
funny
your
that
Captain America Disney MCU crap that you want. You don't need to be here, buddy. Like,
but like you flash forward a decade later, and this isn't a controversy anymore. I feel like this is one of the more accepted things in the movie, which is what I appreciate
yes.
about it. Yeah, I like the brief moment with the drone, although it doesn't make sense that he specifically says, "I know you're trying to find out where I hang my cape, and you're not going to find out. I need to protect my identity." And then he's like, "Well, how do I know I could trust you?" And he says, Colonel, I grew up in Kansas. You've just given him like 90% of the clues he needs to figure out who you are now. I grew up in Kansas. All he's going to think is, well, gee, we had that big battle scene when we were in Smallville, Kansas. So if you grew up in Kansas, it's probably where you lived. And, oh, wait, there was a cop who delivered Lois. You're saying you don't, this is where it becomes a problem for me because you said I need to protect my identity, but then gave him every clue by saying I grew up in Kansas. Yeah, the whole I think he's kind of hot is basically there for everyone watching this movie, and it did get a huge laugh in the theater. But this final moment is what's so good with Jonathan, and I like the Daily Planet ending; it's kind of fun. But the Jonathan moment is like, oh, that one hits you with how powerful it is because it's about I just wish that he had been able to see what I'd become, and then you just have Martha saying he did see, and then you cut to this shot of a kid playing with a cape. And Jonathan's just looking, and you're like, Jonathan sees this is what he could become just because he's striking this heroic pose. I'm like, that is such a perfectly placed scene with no dialogue at all. And then the final scene, to me, my favorite part about this is you get that little fun thing with Steve Lombard trying to pick up Lois, and she says, maybe you should go back to trolling the intern pool. And then he's like, Jenny, not Jenny.
Not Jenny. You're deserving much better than that bald old guy. Like, come on.
But the best part of this is when Lois gets introduced to Clark and she says, welcome to the planet. Not welcome to the Daily Planet, welcome to the planet. And he says, I'm glad to be here. Like we said, this movie's about an alien coming to Earth. What happens when an alien's on Earth? And the fact they ended on welcome to the planet, I'm like, oh, that's so good. Again, cheesy, but so good.
Is there nothing else to add? Like,
I mean, there's good end credits. I stick with them like you do. I like the music.
oh yeah, oh fair enough. I thought you were gonna say something else, just like recap of what you like, but that's okay. We got some IMDb stuff to before we go to our final thoughts and before our ranking of all the Superman movies. Because yes, I did watch Superman 2 and 3, so we'll get to see what my thoughts on that very quickly are. But first, I have a review from a 8 out of 10 star from IMDb.
Can I interrupt you because sorry, I did have another note I forgot to mention.
Wow,
and this is important.
Wow,
too.
now this is wow.
This is important. This is very important. So I did forget to mention for one thing that the scientist of Zod's crew who's on the ship who's analyzing the blood, that's actually identified in the credits. I don't think they mentioned my name in it. That's identified as Jaxer in the credits, and Jaxer in the comics was a scientist of Krypton. But more importantly, Farah, as I was mentioned, who is in the comics Zod's wife. This actress that plays Farah in the movie was not the original actress cast. Angie Trow, I think I'm pronouncing that name correctly. She's the one who plays it. Zach Snyder originally cast Gal Gadot to play Farah. And Gal Gadot found out that she was pregnant and had to drop out of the movie. This was 3 years before she ends up being cast as Wonder Woman. So Zach Snyder basically saw something in Gal Gadot. Now, we never would have gotten Wonder. I can't even imagine, would Wonder Woman become as popular as it was without Gal Gadot? I don't think it would have. I mean, Gal Gadot is half of what makes Wonder Woman work. And I don't think this actress play Fiora is going to be Wonder Woman in other words, but so crazy to think that Gal Gadot got pregnant just at the right time where she probably thought to herself, it's like Pierce Brosnan when he was cast in the 80s to play James Bond. And then because he had a contract, he had to pull out. And he's like, well, that's it. Biggest opportunity to my career, and it's gone. And 10 years later, he's like, no, you're James Bond. Henry Cavil, I almost was Superman. I almost was James Bond. And then he's finally Superman. Gal Gadot's like, my big break. I'm gonna be playing Zod's wife in a Superman movie, but I gotta drop out because I'm pregnant. And 3 years later, would you like to be Wonder Woman? How great is that?
Much more greater than that, but a lot more better than her role in Snow White. But we'll save that for a different
Yeah,
day.
I will say she's still the best thing in Snow White. It's just not when she's singing. And she's not a bad singer, but it's not even
Her
she's a bad
singing
singer.
is laughable. Like
No, but
it's
it's
worse
not
than mine. It's
it's not
worse.
no, it's not terrible. What's terrible is that her character is genuinely menacing in that movie, but then when she's singing, you can't take her seriously. That's the problem.
I still don't think she was a great actor in that movie, but nobody was a great actor in Snow White, so it speaks for himself. All right, finally, if Colin's not going to interrupt me, so thank you very much. We're going to go to some reviews. I got one that's 8 out of 10 star. Keep that on the back of your head because this a little bit at the end is going to be a little bit confusing. But this one is entitled "I Changed My Mind" by Rob Seagar from 2024 in October. So this was very recent. Here, 11 years after this movie released, I have changed my mind about this movie. In the last 11 years, we have seen so many other DCEU and MCU superhero movies with one would or could connect to the other, making us assume and create some fan theories about what happened or what will happen next. For example, I think Infinity War and Endgame was the peak MCU. Everything after that storyline kind of made up. While the DCEU, to be honest, was never even started. The connection between one another felt forced. I don't know if you want to touch on that later, but you can. But this movie can be a standalone movie. No need of a sequel or a prequel. It's already a great movie about a man. Every essential you need to he a superhero is fulfilled. The background, the struggle, the realization, principles, everything. It's a perfect superhero movie. Initially, I rated it as 7, but now it's a solid 9. If you were listened before, it was an 8 out of 10. So why did you edit that as a 9? Did you not forget that how the math or I don't know. Did you want to touch on that because you were following the DCEU for a
Yeah.
long time? Did you want to touch on that
Yeah.
connectedness thing?
Well, like I said, this is a movie that it wasn't hated when it came out. It had a decent response, but IMDb is most of the time what you can trust. And the rating for this has gone up over the years. I remember this being at like a 6.8 or a 6.9 not long after it came out, which is not a bad review. It's decent. It's currently sitting at a 7.1. And a lot of people are going to be like, oh, it's just a bunch of like, review bombing, or I guess whatever would be the opposite of review bombing. But the average reviews, the one that gets the most ofs are 7s and 8s. So this isn't people saying 10 stars, 10 stars, 10 stars. This is an honest reflection of people's opinion that it's 7.1, which is pretty solid. And I love this one review here, which is an 8 out of 10 that literally is titled "The Day I Stopped Trusting Critics." Again, not people saying it's a perfect movie. I think the best explanation for this is like kind of like you said at the beginning. It's not a perfect movie, but then again, what superhero movie is? I can count on one hand out of probably close to 100 superhero movies ever made, the ones that are perfect. To me, this is as close as you can get, and you're never going to get people perfect. Just accept it for what it is. It's a good superhero movie.
Did you think that this out of this review, because I was more looking to your response to the connectiveness to the whole like DCEU fandom and just the whole like plot line and all that. Did you think that this could be a standalone where this needs to force franchises, or what do you what are your feelings about that?
I'm not that upset that, as people call it, the Snyderverse, but the DCEU has ended. Although my disappointment is I feel like it should have ended with the final Justice League movie. And especially if you hear what Zack Snyder's plans, I think I don't know if it's been released yet, but they were doing it in comic book form. It would have been so incredible. But I think the longer these things go on, you kind of are forced to reboot it because it's always most interesting in the beginning when you have so many characters, nobody is special. And what works about this, and I feel like what works about a lot of the early ones, Wonder Woman, Batman v Superman, even the first Shazam, is that you're not so crammed with superheroes are everywhere. You've got a select group and they're all kind of doing their own things. This works in a way where, because it's about an alien, and this is where I'll say it's storyline wise, people could say whatever they want about execution, but storyline wise, a better idea to build a franchise on than the MCU had is that it has a beginning of there are aliens on this earth. There are people with powers. We don't know what to do with it. And that leads to a character, Batman, who is literally one of the superpowered characters, basically being fearful. And then you create characters like Lex Luthor and all these other ones who have genuine reason to be afraid because of how you position this movie. So it works as a way to introduce a universe in a very interesting way, but I love that it is a stand. When I watch this movie, I don't think about it thinking about where we're going to get to in Justice League. I like watching this as it's a Superman movie and nobody else exists yet.
Yep, and that's fair. I got two one-star reviews that I want to quickly go through because they're actually pretty funny. This first one is a 1 out of 10 star by Chuck Leatherwood on June 13th, 2013, entitled Worst Superman Ever. So listen to this, okay? This is going to be very, very, very interesting. I have never been so disappointed in a movie in all my life. How in the world can the story of Superman be screwed up so badly? I wish I could get my money back. The storyline was bad. The acting was bad. The action scenes were too much. Why would they do this to such a great story? I honestly do not see how anyone could like this movie if they have ever known anything about Superman. The scenes from Krypton were bad. The way they used the flashbacks to tell the Smallville story was bad. The whole Zod storyline was poorly written. The battle scenes looked like they destroyed Metropolis, but yet Clark goes to work at the Daily Planet at the end? This was an overproduced, poorly written movie with a storyline that has so much potential. I suggest everyone save their money. I think that's a couple, 10 years too late there, buddy, because I think a lot of people actually
Wait,
do like this movie.
what year, when did that review come out?
June 13th, 2013.
Okay, so this was, I guess, right as the movie was coming out. I
Yeah.
never believe any 1 star reviews, unless it's clearly something that's terrible. Like on Letterboxd, I'll give half a star reviews or 1 star reviews, but you actually they have a way of tabulating what ratings are you most commonly given. Uh, Half a star and 1 star are my least common. When somebody says 1 star for a movie like this, they're clearly just hating on the movie. A 1 star review should be reserved for like the worst of the worst movies. And literally all that person did was describe everything that was in the movie and say the word bad after it. They give no explanation as to why it's bad.
Well, this one has a little bit more of an explanation. This was a 1 star out of a 10 by Blaze Jazz on June 15th, so just a couple days after, entitled Bad. So I'm not up to the good start because of bad
Bad.
stuff. but listen to this. Worst movie. The opening had a promise with Russell Crowe as Jor-El sending his son on his journey. The minimal dialogue revealed very little about the characters. Even Lois Lane is a shadow of her former self with longing looks and not much of the spunk that we expect from her character. Where is the fun newsroom banter? The entire project is based on computer graphics explosions and destruction. They destroy building after building after building, gas station, supermarket, skyscraper, until you are just bored with the repetitive plot. It is terrible. The fighting is a blur, and Superman is just not his super self. Don't waste your money unless you are a young male looking for a movie that looks like a video game. I'm so disappointed that they made an awful Superman movie. If you like anything besides violent fights and explosions, you'll be bored to your tears. Save your money for the next Superman, Batman, or Iron Man movie. So he describes a little bit of what he likes. I actually agree with him a little bit about the whole Lois Lane spunk, but everything else, man, like you don't have to like why? Like this is just ridiculous. Got some plot keywords
Before you do
here.
plot keywords,
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I knew there was something I was missing because I'm like that I think he's kind of hot lady at the end of the movie. I'm like, why do I feel like there was some trivia about her? So I looked it up, and yeah, it's actually her badge identifies her as like Captain Ferris or something like that. But the end credits identify her as Carol Ferris, who is of course the girlfriend of the Green Lantern. So her character is supposed to be the Green Lantern's girlfriend, who's clearly Henry Cavill's power is that even the Green Lantern's girlfriend is going to be checking out Superman instead of him.
All right, plot keywords. We got four of them that are actually pretty funny. So this one's first is natural childbirth. Childbirth is a plot
Oh,
keyword of this movie.
I hope there's a movie I hope is on there.
Okay, so number one, Man of Steel, obviously. Number two, Gattaca. I like
Oh,
Gattaca.
one of my favorite movies of all time.
Knocked Up, number three, and Phenomenal, number four. Were those any of the four movies that you were thinking?
Yes, Jamie? No, I'm just wrapping up. Why? Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
All right. Were any of
Uh,
those movies that you were
Not
thinking about?
no, although Gattaca is one of my all-time favorite movies. But there's a movie Andrew Garfield made with Florence Pugh last year called We Live in Time. It
Oh,
was
I
like
was
a
gonna check that out. I was actually very interested in
It's
that.
a pretty good movie, but I'll just tell you this. There is a birthing scene in that movie that is like one of the greatest scenes I have ever seen and one of the most realistic scenes ever. Everybody needs to watch. If they skip the rest of the movie, just watch the birthing scene. It is more epic than anything Superman and Zod do in this movie, and I love this movie.
That is crazy. Next one, building collapse. Building collapse is another plot keyword because obviously a lot of buildings collapse in this one. Building,
Transformers, Avengers.
no, actually, Final Destination's Bloodlines. That's number
Oh,
one.
yeah.
Exception, number two. Casino Royale from 2006. That's number three. And There Will Be Blood, number four. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is actually number five. Man of Steel is actually number six. And surprisingly, Sing, the Illumination movie about animals singing, is number seven. So it actually surpassed The Flash, Spectre, Spider-Man Homecoming, Age of Ultron, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and The Mummy. So Sing is obviously doing something with their building collapse to surpass all those other ones. Superhero crying. Superhero crying, another plot keyword here. Avengers Endgame number one, Spider-Man number two, Avengers Infinity War number three, Man of Steel number four. Nothing really stands out here except for nothing really here. There's a number 15 here. 2010 movie Super. Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah, Rainn Wilson. I think it was a parody of superhero movies. I never watched it.
Okay, well, it's rated as number six, as number 15, and the Powerpuff Girls movie is rated as number 17. So, well done. You didn't surpass any other ones. And the last one before we go to any box office and award stuff, because I'm guessing this thing got some awards. This is Man Wear Eyeglasses. Man wears eyeglasses. That's a
Superman
keyword.
1, Superman 2, Superman 3, Superman
No,
4, The Quest for
actually,
Peace.
no, actually, it's going to be number one, Breaking Bad. Number two, The
Mhm.
Sopranos. Number three, the live action remake of Lilo and Stitch, which I actually did not like very much. And number four, The Life of Chuck. Where is Superman in this one? Where is Superman?
I can't tell you.
Space Spaceballs is number 15. Jurassic World is number 18. Jaws 2 is number 20. Where is Superman? Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
Are you
the most
actually kidding
iconic
me?
character to put on a pair of glasses.
Stupid IMDb bull crap. All right, let's go to box office and other stuff. So this one, like you said, got a 7.1 on IMDb out of 10. Looking for the box office. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? I know it's here somewhere. Oh, there we go. So the budget was 225 million estimated. The opening weekend was 116 million, which is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
The gross USA and Canada was 291 million, and the whole gross worldwide was 270 million dollars, which is just
670.
sorry 670, which is just a little bit shy of a billion. Which honestly, that is a pretty good budget. You make like
Yeah.
triple your budget. That's actually pretty good. Colin, is there any awards that we can point out for this movie here?
Um, sure. As I type awards in here, let's see the Critics' Choice Awards. Henry Cavill was nominated for Best Actor in an Action Movie. That's actually pretty
Okay.
good for Critics' Choice. Those are critics, and the critics apparently don't
So,
like these movies.
so who won then? I'm just actually curious. Who won that?
Well, I will tell you that right now, since I have it right here in front of me, with no need to stall at all. So that was yes, a best actor in an action movie. That it was actually the 2000 and where is this here? I'm not even seeing it. Hold on. Henry Cavill,
Seriously?
Henry Cavill. There we go. 2013, Mark Wahlberg for Lone Survivor.
What?
Good movie.
What?
Believe it or not, this also was the year Robert Downey Jr. was nominated for Iron Man 3 and Brad Pitt for World War Z, or Z if you're listening from the United States.
Waste of a nomination. Mark Wahlberg. Are you kidding me?
I mean, the previous year
the-
Daniel
He is
Daniel
my
Craig won for
nightmare.
Skyfall.
Holy crap! My goodness, my man.
But it did win the MTV Movie Award for Best Hero for Henry Cavill.
Oh, okay.
So
Cool,
that
cool.
year, Henry Cavill beat Robert Downey Jr. for Iron Man, Martin Freeman for The Hobbit: Desolation of Smaug, Chris Hemsworth for Thor: The Dark World, and Channing Tatum for White House Down. There you go. MTV Movie Award for Best Hero. That sounds like a well-received movie for me.
Is there any Oscars or anything
No.
that big?
No, and really this should have been nominated for best visual effects. I don't know
Oh, of course.
what it got nominated in the Visual Effects Society, but
Oh,
yeah, like at least a nomination. These visual effects are unbelievable in
oh,
this movie.
absolutely. And again, Zack Snyder is the one that brings out everything here. Like,
Yeah.
it's one of the most crazy things here. It actually got a Saturn Award for 2014 for best comic to film motion picture. Um,
Which was won by Iron
there's
Man 3, which I feel like if you do this 10 years later, I don't know if that many people are ready to jump on Iron Man 3 as the best superhero movie of 2013.
yeah.
Now, arguably, Man of Steel, Thor: The Dark World, and The Wolverine were the other ones up, so maybe they would. I don't know, but I personally think of those four movies, I feel like Man of Steel is it's making me choke up as what it's doing. It is head and shoulders above the others.
It here's a most like weird award here. Another Saturn Award. Dylan Sprayberry as best
Mm.
performance by a younger actor. So he got a nomination of that. And of course, we couldn't mention this, but Hans Zimmer won the award for top box office films for ASCAP award. So good for him. And this thing got nominated for BAFTA Children's Award
BAFTA.
for feature film. So, and yeah, so pretty good. And then Hollywood Movie Award, Zack Snyder got nominated for that as well. So, a lot of good nominations, but not a lot of wins. So, yeah. That's basically it. All right, let's do our ranking of Superman before we go to our final score. I am gonna do from bottom to top. I'm gonna do Superman: The Quest for Peace, and then Superman 3, Superman 2, Superman 1, Superman Returns, and oh, actually, no, wait, no, Man of Steel and then Superman Returns. So Superman and
Ah,
Man of Steel are actually top two there. And again, I'm not to say Superman 1. I just think the effects on these two other movies are a lot better. I do respect it for the time that it had come out. So I still respect it. I just think that Superman Returns and Superman and Man of Steel are still better movies. But Colin,
and
you're probably gonna have a little bit of a non-similar list here, I'm
well,
guessing.
I'm glad you didn't include Batman v Superman and Justice League, just because to me those are
Those are
team up
not
movies. They're
Superman
not.
movies.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a team
absolutely.
up.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so I actually have one more than you because there is one theatrical Superman film that you did not mention in there, which was
Oh.
1951's Superman and the Mole Men, starring
Oh.
George Reeves. Which this was before the TV. This was basically a I don't even know how long it was. It was barely over an hour. It was 58 minutes, but it was released theatrically as a film to try to get interest in making the TV series, which 2 years later they did make with George Reeves starring as Superman. But believe it or not, that will be my bottom, simply because it's a very low budget 1950s Superman, and I love the George Reeves TV series. That is my bottom. With Superman 4: The Quest for Peace next. Superman 3, I have an affection for Superman 3, even though it's not a perfect movie. I think it's better than a lot of people give it credit for, but it's not a great movie. So Superman 3 will be my next one. And then I'm basically the same as you, other than Superman 1, the movie, will be higher. So Superman
Yeah.
2, I would put next, which I would put almost on level with the Richard Donner cut. The Richard Donner cut makes some improvements, but some things not as good. And then my top three are the same as you, except for Superman, the movie, is my number one, and Superman Returns is my number two, and the Man of Steel my number three.
Okay. So we were actually pretty similar there. No other comments. Again, I actually, honestly, I still respect you for putting Superman 1 there because that is your favorite movie, and obviously that would make sense why Superman Returns would be on number 2 as well. I am obviously buying this movie. Colin, if you rent or bin this movie, I will literally kill you. So what are you gonna do?
Wow. I own. In fact, I did not buy this movie originally when it came out. I don't have it here on display, but when this movie came out on Blu-ray, your other uncle, he actually bought me it for Christmas. But what he did is he bought me the collector's set that included both the DVD, the Blu-ray, and the 3D DVD. But it was a limited edition, like only 10,000 of them made in an actual tin that's in the shape of the Superman logo, and it has like a collector's stand in it. So there's only 10,000 of these made, and I've got like it actually comes with like the numbered thing and all that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he bought me that because like I know you're eventually going to get a 3D TV, so I figured I might as well get you the best Superman movie possible. I had that a year before I even owned a 3D TV. So before we started recording, I was by myself in the house upstairs watching Superman or Man of Steel in 3D on my 3D TV. But yes, I would have bought this probably for the same price if it had not been a Christmas present. And yeah, I still love this movie. I mean, I think that it's very hard to screw up Superman. No, it's not that hard to screw up Superman, but if you put some effort into it, then you get it mostly right. And as long as you get it mostly right, I'm happy.
And I think this is honestly the best looking Superman movie. I know you're probably I don't know what you're gonna think about that, but I think this is the best looking. Like the shots are amazing, the score is incredible, and like the flying sequences are just they're gonna be hard to top with James Gunn's Superman. But
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be pretty close to the race there.
Can I just say that there is some criticism for, if you want to transition this really quickly,
Yeah.
there is some criticism for the look of David Cornsweet's
Oh,
Superman,
is
which
it about the forehead?
it's a very unappealing shot. Yes, there is a very unappealing shot which has made its way online, which you're picking one thing out in a movie. I don't think it all looks bad. I will say though, I mean, I like that it's a very traditional looking costume. It's like something you would have seen in the 40s or the 50s. I don't necessarily think that he looks. I think the biggest problem is he looks stronger as Clark Kent than he does as Superman. There's something with the padded suit that makes him look weaker, and it's funny because I didn't say anything about that opinion when we saw the trailer in movie theaters. Your auntie Jamie, as she usually did, she's like, oh, when she saw the promo pictures, like, this guy doesn't look that handsome. When we watched the preview that actually shows the interview scene between him and Lois Lane, she goes, "Ooh, this guy looks handsome." And then they show him as Superman. She goes, "Not so much in the suit though." So I don't think it's just some angry fans on the internet. I think a lot of the angry fans on the internet do have some valid opinions. I don't think the suit looks bad, but I do think the suit makes him look weak, mostly because he looks way too strong as Clark Kent. They needed to do some baggier clothes or nerdier look or something. But yeah, there's some hate for this movie. But again, as I've been saying since the beginning, go back. That's why this whole false narrative about everybody hates the Man of Steel and Batman v Superman started in the first place, is because you had a bunch of angry people on the internet who probably hadn't even seen the movie, who started review bombing and doing all this stuff. And to this day, you look up things on Letterboxd and none of these DC movies. This has a 7.1 on IMDb. It's got a 3 on Letterboxd. Those don't correspond properly. So I'm behind the new movie. I'm anxious for it. There's some things which I'm like, I don't think that's going to work necessarily, but I thought the same thing. I mentioned I thought the same thing with both Superman Returns and with Man of Steel. So I'm optimistic, but the point is, people did kind of ask for this with the way they treated the Snyder fans over the years, specifically the way they treated Snyder's films when there's nothing wrong with them. So you reap what you sow, but at the same time, give it a rest, because some people want to enjoy the movie.
Yeah. And obviously, I will say, like, after that third trailer that they released with, like, the tickets thing, like, I am more than convinced that Nicholas Hoult is going to knock it out of the park with his Lex Luthor. Like, it looks phenomenal. And the marketing, even, like, we had that one post on Instagram where Superman is just, like, was, like, talking, and then Nicholas Hoult just, like, pushes him, and then he's like, "Get your tickets for Superman now." So I love
and David Cornsweet's like, "Oh, you have such strong hands, Nicholas."
And then obviously there is a scene that has been released online with Superman encountering Lex with a desk, and he literally throws it to the window, which I haven't seen it fully, but it looks great. Like, I am so excited for David Cornsweet and Nicholas Holt's reaction to each other as Lex Luthor and Superman. So, we are continuing our summer blockbusters here. We are Venom Superman month. Obviously, no, we won't. We're not ending it right now. We will be ending it when we get to Superman, probably at the weekend. And then obviously you just heard Jurassic World. That was one of the big ones. And then the next big one will be Fantastic Four: First Steps after this one, which I am really excited about, especially after that latest new trailer, which looks fantastic. Quote.
No, it looks fantastic.
Say that again.
Fantastic.
I was making a stupid Fantastic Four Miles Teller reference. What'd you say? But I'm excited.
Rest in peace, Julian McMahon, the original Doctor Doom, who died this past weekend.
Rest in peace. I forgot to mention.
Amazing as Doctor Doom. Those movies are underrated, especially him. He is so good as Doctor Doom.
Absolutely, I agree. And those were my childhood Fantastic Four. So I'm really heartbroken, and we're very, very heartbroken and very sad to see that he passed away recently. I don't know what it was from, but we sincerely
I think it was
share
cancer
our
or something.
apologies. Oh shoot! Well, we
well, it wasn't your fault.
Or was it?
Oh shoot! I'm so sorry.
Maybe my podcast cancer rays were given cancer. I don't know, but yeah, we sincerely send our our condolences, and we're still sorry. Not that they're going to hear this.
We're so sorry. Again, I think I mentioned this on the Jurassic World review, but people have been waiting for the Clone Wars. Now that we've finished this mad rush to get the Superman movies done, Clone Wars episodes are going to start going up again. What are you going to start posting them next week?
This Friday, actually.
Oh, okay. So this Friday.
This Friday we'll get. So this is how it's gonna. So this is how it's gonna be. Clone Wars is gonna be. Okay, so Superman's coming. Okay, you're seeing this on Wednesday. Okay, Superman's gonna be releasing this weekend. I'm either gonna be publishing this on Sunday or Monday because I have a busy weekend heading up. So we'll try and head up. We'll try and record this as soon as we can. So we'll get that going
for the review.
Yeah. For the review, and then 2 weeks after we will do a spoiler review as well, just to give our big opinion on what the whole trajectory of the DCU is going to look like, and also maybe a little bit of reaction to the Supergirl stuff. So we'll have to see about that. And then like I said, summer blockbusters. We got Fantastic Four happening at the end of the month, so look forward to that. I'm sure Uncle Colin's looking forward to it because he's so
fantastic.
He's looked so inclined to seeing that Silver Surfer, like so inclined. He's gonna be gazing all over her. It's like Jamie gazing over Henry Cavil. It's gonna be the same thing there. Oh, she just looks so shiny. But we'll leave you with that. My name is Patrick, and they should really call it the Cantina Cuisine.
And my name is Colin, and I was bred to be a podcaster, Patrick. Trained my entire life to master my senses. Where did you train? On a farm?
No, in the city. Thank you for listening to the new episode of Cantina Cuisine. Make sure you follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts to listen to new episodes coming out every week just for you. Also, make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, X, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for updates and follow-ups to our episodes and other content that you might like. Again, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you all next time. Peace out, nerds.